I call to order the regular meeting for the Assembly for the Municipality of Anchorage for March 26, 2013. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Trainee?
Mr. Trainee will be joining us very shortly.
Mr. Honeman?
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Honored to be here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Ms. Johnston?
Here.
Mr. Starr?
Here.
Mr. Trombley?
Here.
Ms. Ostrander? Here. Mr. Flynn? Present. Mr. Burt?
Here.
Ms. Kraska?
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Trombley, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mayor Sullivan, do you have a report for us this evening?
No report today, sir.
Thank you. Assembly Chair Well has no report. We'll begin with Assembly members, beginning with you, Mr. Birch.
I don't have a detailed report, but I just wanted to report or summarize our brief meeting with the Anchorage School Board on March 22nd. We had about a 2-hour quarterly meeting with them that most in the Assembly attended. It was an excellent meeting, and I particularly appreciated the great effort in projecting some of the revenues and expenditures and kind of the long-term forecast that we got. And I got that document here. I did talk to Mr. Foster earlier this evening to see if that was available online. He's going to check, but it was a good meeting and as much information I think as I've ever gathered out of one of our joint school board meetings. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report. Just note that on noon on Thursday, the Governor's Choose Respect rally will take place, and for those of us who are fortunate enough to live and work in the downtown area, it will originate on the Park Strip at 9th and I believe F Streets, and will proceed to Town Square Park. So I would encourage folks to participate.
Noon on Thursday.
That is correct.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston?
No report, thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
I just want to state specifically that the reason the Ethics and Elections Committee meeting has only met once coming up to this election is because I didn't want to crowd the schedule of the clerk's office. We did have one meeting at which I've already expressed at a previous Assembly meeting that what we accomplished and the path forward, but I just wanted to say thank you to the clerk's office, to Amanda and Mrs. Jones for the consistent emails that you've sent out and keeping everybody on the Assembly up to date as far as what you are doing to make sure that we do avoid what happened last year. It sounds like the process has been pretty thorough, and I can't thank the clerk's office enough for what they've done. So that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. Mr. Starr?
From budget, we're going to jump into first quarter budget review and amendments as necessary. I'll send out an email later on this week, but got confirmation that we'll see the packet from the administration on April 5th. We'll see a work session for this body to discuss that presentation on April 12th. And then another key date will be amendments to the first quarter budget package. I'm encouraging those by April 18th with voting action on April 23rd so that we can move into setting the tax rates and approval of the first quarter budget amendments if there are any. So I'll shoot an email out from the Budget and Finance Committee here sometime this week. I just had a specific question for the clerk that perhaps, and it's a little bit on the record, but you have everything you need to get the election to come off. I noticed that we're seeing absentee and other polling locations open, but the brunt of the voting April 2nd, we're in A-OK shape.
Mr. Starr, thank you for the question. We are very busy and we are very preoccupied with the election We are doing everything that we can to make sure that we are in good shape. And so far, so good. We are working on staffing issues, and those are something I may be discussing with you again later. I discussed it with the commission and committee, and we may be discussing it again later. Thank you.
And I guess the other question, is there anything the Assembly needs to help you with as that chain of command, or, so we're doing it right in all fronts forward? Do you need anything from us?
I need your support, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your asking the question. I appreciate Mr. Trombley's comment, and I just can't thank you all enough for acknowledging the amount of work that we're doing, especially, as you all know, Deputy Clerk Vanda Moser.
Yeah.
And I thank you all for that.
Okay. Well, keep us in the loop, and don't hesitate on any emergency calls. We'll help you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to do a special thank you to Ms. Osander for agreeing to be my co-pilot tonight. It's kind of strange if I don't have someone there. So, but Ms. Osander, any report? Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the honor of attending the National League of Cities Congressional Conference in D.C. March 8th through the 13th, and we had some really, really wonderful speakers. We had 2 guest speakers. We had Senator McCain, who did a really great presentation on immigration reform, and we also had Vice President Biden, who did a 35-minute presentation on gun control. And then I had a 4-hour Board of Directors meeting that was very, very productive. And if you look, you'll have a handout that was distributed giving you some details on what we did in that board meeting. And then I had the honor of having a meeting on the Hill with Senator Begich and his staff, and also Senator Murkowski, along with some AML staff members and a council member from Kodiak. And then I was very, very pleased because I got a phone call from Jay Williams. He's the White House Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs. And he called me because he realized that the White House did not have a connection at the local level with anybody in Alaska, and they chose me to be that person. And I was very, very honored to get the phone call, and very, very honored that I'll be that person. And I'll be meeting with White House staff in June when I'm there in D.C. for my next board meeting. And I, again, want to thank my colleagues who signed a letter urging Congress to maintain tax-exempt bonds. I really appreciate that. National League of Cities is still working hard to see that through, because it's a really big deal if we lose that priority that we've had for so many years. So again, thank you to some of my colleagues who recognize the urgency and signed that letter that we sent to the President and the House Speaker. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Horniman?
Just notification, the Public Safety Committee meeting will be on Wednesday, the 10th of April, which is a week and a day after the upcoming election. So nothing to report at this moment on anything hot topic-wise coming up. However, you probably saw the letter from the Transportation Commission. There was some folks there from taxis thinking that it might be on the agenda last month, and it was not. So they may be looking for some voice to have someone review what we were working on, and a work session might be in order. I know Ms. Osander had asked for one, and it had been scheduled, and so a recommendation might be to look at a work session, and or Transportation Commission has rung in with, I just noticed, reading through with interest their letter here. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniman. Ms. Frasca?
No report.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 8 on our agenda, which is
Chairman?
the...
Well, I think I'll try to be the queue. I'm not sure if I am. Just a note for Ms. Gray-Jackson. I actually worked in White House IGA many years ago, so if you need any tips, let me know.
I'm so happy for you, Mr. Flynn, but I'm doing okay. Thank you.
we're at item number 8, the addendum to the agenda.
Move to incorporate the addendum and the laid on the table items.
Second.
Thank you. Any objection? Hearing none, I will read these into the minutes, beginning with item 9C, 2, which is AM number 214, a recommendation of award to Roger Hickle Contracting, Inc. for the 2013 Sewer Improvements Asplin Wastewater Treatment Facility, Primary Clarifier 1 and Sludge Thickener 1 upgrades for the municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, and that is in the amount of $1,200,130. We also have 9F12, which is ordinance and resolution for introduction, AO number 53, an ordinance authorizing non-competitive disposal of municipal land at 4409 Lake Otis Parkway, legally described as Lot 1, Lake Otis and Tudor subdivision, to the adjacent landowner. And this is from the Real Estate Department. This is for public hearing on the 9th of April, and that is accompanied by AM number 216. And we have 911B under old business and unfinished, and that's ordinance AO number 37S-1, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 3.70, Employee Relations, with comprehensive updates securing long-term viability and financial stability of employee and labor relations. And that is accompanied by AM 217. We have laid on the table 9A1, AR number 80, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly thanking Prudential Jack White, Vista Realty, Alaska Salvation Army, and the UAA TRIO program for their support and partnership with the Alaska Prudential Youth Leadership Institute, PLYI, Youth Leadership Program, and recognizing the 2013 Alaska Points of Light graduates and the Spirit of Community distinguished finalists. We also have 9B5A, AR number 71S, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its non-objection regarding a new beverage dispensary tourism duplicate liquor license number 5210 and restaurant designation permit for Alyeska Resort Management Company doing business as the Sakaru Asian Bistro located at 1000 Alberg Avenue in Girdwood. We have 9B6A, which is AR number 72S, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its non-objection regarding a new beverage dispensary tourism duplicate license number 5211 and restaurant designation permit for Alaska Resort Management Company doing business as the Pond Cafe located at 1000 Alberg Avenue in Girdwood. And we have 11B5, AO number 37S2, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 3.70, Employee Relations, with comprehensive updates securing long-term viability and financial stability of employees and labor relations. This is all of the amendments, addendum to the agenda and the laid on the table items. I would now take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And at this point, beginning with Mr. Birch, any items to be pulled?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, 3 items this evening. 9B5, which is basically it's Resolution 2013-71, and then 9B6, Resolution 2013-72. Both of those, it's my intent to move as a substitute what was laid on the table this afternoon, 9B5A and 9B6A. And what's happened there is it's basically come to light that the conditional use permit that was approved in 1994 basically addressed this issue, and that the substitutes will permit those the additional licenses that are necessary in that facility, and that this is unnecessary without the substitute. So I'll be moving those substitutes at the appropriate time.
Okay. You said you had 3, Mr.
Yes,
Birch?
and then the item 3 would be 9B8 for purposes of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn? Mr. Trombley? Mr. Stark?
9D7. Delta 7.
9
correct.
Delta 7. Ms. Osiander?
9E3 and 9B4.
B as in boy.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Johnston?
No, thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 9 Apple 1. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For question 9 Bravo 3. Also, I have a question on 9 Foxtrot 3.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Ms. Frasca?
No items.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I did forget to pull one.
Mr. Trombley?
9F, 9 Foxtrot 5.
Thank you. Any other items? Not. I'm going to read the items that we have pulled, beginning with 9A1, 9B, as in boy, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9D, Delta 7, 9E, 3, 9F, 3, and 5. Are there any items that I missed? Seeing, hearing those,
Who pulled 9 Echo 3?
9 Echo
You
3.
did, Debbie? Okay. Thanks.
Yes. With those items approved, any objection to approving the consent agenda lest the items that have been pulled? Seeing, hearing none, the consent agenda has been approved unanimously. We now have before us item 9A1 for reading. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to approve.
Second.
Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, that item is approved unanimously.
And I'm happy to read, Mr. Chairman. Okay. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly thanking Prudential Jack White Vista Realty, Alaska Salvation Army, and the UAA TRIO program for their support and partnership with the Alaska Prudential Youth Leadership Institute Youth Leadership Program, and recognizing the 2013 Alaska Points of Light graduates and Spirit of Community distinguished finalists. Whereas the Prudential Spirit of Community Awards program was created in 1995 by Prudential Financial, Inc., in partnership with the National Association of Secondary School Principals, and is the largest U.S. youth recognition program based exclusively on volunteer community service. Whereas one of the goals of the program is to honor middle level and high school students for outstanding service to others at the local, state, and national level. Whereas the 16th Annual Points of Light Youth Leadership Institute was sponsored as part of the Prudential National Spirit of Community Initiative in Alaska over spring break, March 11th through the 15th, 2013, at the Anchorage Salvation Army Corps Community Center. Whereas 22 outstanding youth leaders in volunteer and service participated in a 40-hour community leadership training program that included skill development and instruction in self and community assessment, diversity, goal setting, team building, project planning, and decision making, hands-on field exercises, including 3 community service projects that included preparing and distributing 90 sack lunches to the hungry, and assisted at the McKennell House Transitional Homeless Shelter. And these participants were honored as Alaska's 2013 Alaska Points of Light Youth Leadership Institute graduates: Brianna J. Bundick Kelly, Begich Middle School; Eric A. Butler, West Anchorage High School; Tracy D. Butler, West Anchorage High School; Jaleesa Baez, East Anchorage High School; Mai Vane Chain, Bartlett High School; Cheyenne De Leon, Eagle River High School; Concepcion R. Diego, A.J. Diamond High School; Simon Froelich, Stellar Secondary School; Bao Hare, Bartlett High School; Vang Hare, Bartlett High School; Jordan Lewis, Begich Middle School; Chu Lor, Bartlett High School; Kia Lor, Bartlett High School; Diana Gonzalez Nolasco, University of Alaska Anchorage; Steve Pavlakis, University of Alaska Anchorage; Tarek Rutherford, South Anchorage High School; Kobe Scott, Raven Correspondence School; Charles Joe Tung, Mears Middle School; Cherry Amor Vinoya, West Anchorage High School; Amore Weekly, Home School; Kalena Weimer, West Anchorage High School; Carissa Young, Bartlett High School. Whereas the Anchorage Municipal Assembly joins in celebrating these distinguished Anchorage students who demonstrate an unwavering commitment to improving the quality of life for all residents and serve as harbingers of a bright future within the municipality of Anchorage. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly congratulates Alaska's 2013 Prudential Spirit of Community Award recipient and graduates of Alaska's 2013 Points of Light Youth Leadership Institute and applauds Prudential Financial and Friends of Alaska, PYLI, in partnership with Prudential Jack White Vista Real Estate, UAA Trio, Alaska Salvation Army, and local schools and youth organizations for their support of Anchorage youth leadership and student volunteerism. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 26th day of March 2013.
Mr. Chairman, if you might take a second of indulgence, Mr. Bassett has a camera, so we can get a picture real quick before we move on. That'd be great. Secondly, he has invited, and he'll tell you in just a moment, several of these students a little later in the hour, so we're hoping we get a chance to use some privilege to have them introduce themselves.
We will do that. He has a request for public appearance at 6, or between 6 and 6:30.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair of the Assembly, Mr. Mayor. This is such a great program, and when we invest our best in young people, they become the best adults. I want to thank the sponsors, Prudential Jack White Vista Realty, for the last 16 years, hard to believe, has been rock solid. And our partners, the Salvation Army of Alaska, where we've been hosting the training at the new Salvation Army Community Core Center. If you've not seen that facility, it's extraordinary. And the University of Alaska TRIO program, which the Educational Talent Search program works with West and East and Bartlett and the feeder middle schools. So we were able to recruit across the community 22 young people from grades 8 all the way through the University of Alaska. And they spent and invested 5 of their vacation days in training from 8:30 to 5 o'clock. This is an adult training offered to young people to help create them into our best adults. It was a fabulous training, and it was topped off with 3 wonderful service projects Friday, which you heard a little bit about. And it's all about young people having the skills and tools and learning the capacity that they have to improve the community through direct service. And your support for them is wonderful. We have the greatest and longest running Points of Light youth leadership training in the country because of your support and the sponsors and the supporters. So when the young people come, I'm going to ask them to come down, and hopefully they'll get a chance to introduce themselves. Without good sponsors like the Salvation Army and UAA TRIO and the support of community adults and community leaders, young people are not going to become the leaders that we want them to. So I won't take up any more time, except we're very grateful for the recognition, and I'm sure the young people are, and hopefully they'll get a chance to say a few words.
Thank you. We have a comment, Mr. Honeman.
I know that we'll get a chance to see you again when yeah, I understand it's a 6 o'clock public hearings, public request, appearance request. But I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Bassett. I know that a lot of these students take a lot of the credit for, again, giving up their time and investing, but no one more energetic or spirited that could get the Spirit of Youth Award and Spirit of Youth program together than you. So I want to thank you for all your years of dedication to this enthusiasm.
Thank you. We now have before us item 9B3, AR number 69, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $9,108 in miscellaneous donations to the Miscellaneous Operations Grants Fund 261 for the purchase of emergency response and fire prevention training supplies for the Anchorage Fire Department.
Move to approve. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, I just was reading through this, and sorry I didn't get my question out earlier, but what kind of sticks in my mind is the question, perhaps, the last line on I guess you could say the second page, or the first page, I'm sorry, lines 15 through 17. These amounts have been identified in an effort to appropriate all available funding before the ERP conversion from PeopleSoft to SAP. So my question is that it appears that the $5,200 has been identified as donations, but can somebody explain to me what that means, if you don't mind? The exhausting all amounts from ERP conversion? What is it?
Through the chair, we are working on cleaning up accounts and going through a cleansing process. So this is just part of that overall initiative.
Okay, so $3,900 and $3,908 apparently. Are those from previous donations, and are those identified where they came from?
I can't answer that question at this time. I would need to have I can get back with you tomorrow.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That's all.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Honeman? Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, that item is approved unanimously. We now have before us item 9B4, AR 70, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $75,000 from Sean T. and Megan C. Debenham as payment in lieu of providing street light improvements obligated by subdivision agreements of Concord Hills Phase 4 to the Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service Capital Improvement Fund 144.
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
The rationale is the dollar amount is apparently incorrect.
Any objection? Hearing none, that item is postponed indefinitely. We now have before us item 9B5, AR number 71, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its protest regarding a new beverage dispensary tourism duplicate license number 5210 and restaurant designation permit for Alyeska Resort Management Company doing business as Saku Asian Bistro. This item is before us. Mr. Birch?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would move to substitute 9B5A. That would be AR 2013-71S. If I get a second and a third.
Second.
Third, second. Okay. This substitute, basically, as mentioned earlier, is a version that is conveys a non-objection to the Alaska Beverage Control Board.
Mr. Birch, what I'm going to need is number one, your motion to substitute, and then you can speak to approving.
Gotcha.
You need the motion to approve.
I moved to substitute.
Okay.
You want to have a vote on the substitute, or which?
Any objection to the substitution? Hearing none.
I'd like to hear the reason for the substitute before we substitute. So I think it's reasonable to speak to it. Please.
Okay. Mr. Birch.
Oh, okay. I will continue. Basically, in 1994, this body approved, I believe Mr. Trainey was actually chairman at that time, conditional use permit that enabled the liquor licenses to be used within the Alyeska Resort proper as they see fit. And it was overlooked during the process. That backup language is attached to both this and the subsequent resolution, both the 94 ordinance that addresses the CUP and also the concurrence of the municipal clerk's office and the planning office on March 22nd. That is the last email you'll see in the package here. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the explanation. I don't know who here from the clerk's office could answer. We got a pretty detailed email from Ms. Nowak yesterday, and then I just got this half an hour ago. So if I could just have a little reconciliation of the disparate comments I'm getting, I would appreciate that. So Ms. Jones or whomever you designate, I'd appreciate that.
Mr. Flynn, through the chair, I asked Ms. Novak to look at the documents and to let me know if they were satisfactory, and she reported that she reviewed both documents and that she had no corrections or additional suggestions.
So just to clarify, it's your office's recommendation that we approve these, I guess, the substitute versions.
It is.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Okay, at this point, any objection to the substitution? Seeing, hearing none, we will substitute 9B5A for 9B5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. We need a motion to approve it.
Okay, I didn't know if you were doing that without objection or not. Okay. Moved it.
Second.
And Mr. Birch, do you wish to speak to that?
I do not. I think we've brought that up before.
Very good.
It's good. Thank you.
Any objection to the approval? Seeing, hearing none, that motion is approved. We now have before us item 9B6, AR number 72, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This item is before us. Mr. Birch?
Move to substitute this as well as with item number 9B6A.
Third.
Okay. Any, do we need another explanation? Are we good?
No, it's identical to the,
Okay.
the prior.
Thank you.
But you don't need a third.
Any objection to the substitution? Seeing and hearing none, we have substituted 9B6A for 9B6. Mr. Birch?
Just move the item.
Move to approve.
So moved.
Okay. Any objection? Seeing and hearing none, that item is approved. We now have before us item 9B8, AR number 77, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to guide rewrite of AMC Chapter 3.70 to informed and responsible closure using the tools found successful in prior municipal practice and allowing time for detailed development and disclosure prior to Assembly action. Mr. Birch.
I don't agree with this and will not be moving it.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Honeman?
I'd move to approve this, but one of the sponsors is not here at the moment. He should be here shortly. I'd like to request reordering this for towards the end of it, so hopefully he'll be here a moment to vote on this.
Okay. I will do that.
Thank you.
We will move that. We don't have much left in this portion here. I will probably move that to be just ahead of old business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
go to 7.
I now have before us item 9D7, AM number 189, priority purchase of TriTech Visa card software maintenance support for TriTech software systems for the municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Fire Department, AFD, in the amount of $133,482.24. This item is before us.
Move to approve.
Second?
Well, I just want to take a minute to explain what this item is, and so that we're not confused later on. And it's a moment of privilege a little bit, but what I asked for in conjunction with a couple other assembly members was a task force to talk about some of our outdated software in the 911, the NG 911 task force. It now has been formed. We've had one meeting, and it quickly comes to light when you look at the challenges with the upcoming software that both the police department and the fire department use as dispatching and records keeping software, that we're going to need to make some major investments in that. And so the reason for pulling this is to sort of draw some light to that we're going to need to make some decisions, not primarily in the AFD. This appropriation keeps, from my understanding, keeps the software licensing agreements and the new products in front of our dispatchers. Computer-aided dispatch, or CAD, also is in conjunction with record-keeping software. The Anchorage Fire Department software, as I'm told, is relatively whole and works pretty well. What I don't want to do is make the assumption that TriTech software will work for the police department as well. But I want to have full disclosure that that's one of the options that we're talking about, is does it make sense to have software that both departments use? And I clearly want to put that on the record, because we're not jumping right away to consolidations or any sort of statements or discussions with that. But it's my intention at the task force committee to have a prudent discussion on just what's good investment. By making this, we're fully vesting into the fire department, and I recommend that as I've moved approval of it. But we're going to have the same discussion when it comes to fire department, or excuse me, police department software. So that said, urge approval, but all that wordy speak was the topic's going to be back in front of us in about 90 days. So thank you very much for your time. Urge approval.
Thank you. Seeing no one in the queue, any objection? Seeing, hearing none, that item is approved. We now have before us item 9E3, AM 24, which is the 2012 fourth quarter public facility financial statements. This item is before us.
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Second?
The rationale is that the administration would like to update the attachment. It's not quite fully accurate yet.
Any objection from the body? Seeing, hearing none, that item is postponed indefinitely. We now have before us 9F3, AO 50, an ordinance authorizing a lease with Providence Health and Services, Washington Providence, Alaska Medical Center for office space at 3925 Tudor Center Drive, Real Estate Department.
Move to approve.
Introduce.
Introduce. Sorry.
Second. Hit the screen, Paul, will you?
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Horniman?
I'm interested in, and one of the bullet points on the discussion is reference the loss of some state funding for this center, and I'm curious, as I know at one time we had some federal funding through Senator Murkowski's office, and also some concerns that the state needs to help us in this manner. So I'd be looking forward to the discussion when this comes before the body. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And that item has been moved for introduction. We will have, we have now before us 9F5, AO number 52, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code section 3.20.070 to restructure the Department of Public Works. This item is before us. Mr. Trombley.
I don't intend to introduce. If we could just let it die.
Okay.
I made a mistake on it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just for clarification, so you're not introducing this, Mr. Trombley? Right.
No.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That completes our consent agenda for this evening.
Remember? You postponed that one.
I postponed it. I'm going to hold it before the start of new business.
Okay, he's here.
Oh, Mr. Trainee is here. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see Mr. Trainee arrive. We now have before us 9B8, and Mr. Horniman, you had the floor.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Hit the screen, Lee.
Get ready to hit the speak request, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Horniman?
Yes, this is one of those arenas in doing the research and having the benefit of being present from the other side in the audience through 1988 and then again in 1989. I had a brief discussion. I don't want to repeat everything I said before at the work session with S1 version, but what brings to mind even more concern is at 6 p.m. after the work session, 6 p.m. that same night, now we have an S2 version in draft, which just goes to show you that we really do need, as a body, to take control of, if you will, the information that we're getting, making sure that we fully understand it, and if there are any concerns or questions, that we do this right. We're making law change in a substantial way on the collective bargaining, and I think we owe it no less to ourselves. If one of our prior bodies took the time to make sure they got it right, they took 6 months to look through the documents, they did a task force, much like Mr. Starr talked about with IT upgrades and technology and Next Gen 911, and he's doing it right. That just is a perfect example, a great segue of explaining that, you take the time, get a task force together, a working committee, however, with the administration's municipal attorney or Mr. Owen, since he apparently was the person who initially started out this ordinance change, and then work with labor and work with this body, because we're going to be reviewing a lot more than what we're seeing so far. I mean, there's still lots of questions, not to mention the fact that, of course, we've had several, even as recent as today, several emails that have come in with still more questions and still more concerns. So I would fully, I can't implore each of you on this body strongly enough to fully get behind taking the time and making sure that we make the changes. I'm not opposed to making changes to 3.70. I'm not. I just think we need to do this right. So I would urge approval.
Mr. Trainee?
I'm enjoying with my colleague. We need some time to take a long, hard look at this thing. This gives us the time we need, because this is a monumental change in the direction we're heading. We need to give ourselves the time to understand. As he was saying, we got an S version at 4:12 according to the clerk on Friday. I think that was the time you were telling me, Barbara. And is that the right time?
Yes, too.
Through the chair, it was close.
Okay, good. Well, I know we're within a couple of minutes of each other. But it's not been done correctly. And we'll get into that later, because I was telling Bill Starr, I sat through listening to you guys talk in 2008 on the labor negotiation. Interesting comments from the Assembly. And the big thing was, we don't have the information we need to make a decision. We don't have the information now to make a decision. We need this time to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Mr. Honeman for bringing this forward, and I was truly honored to be a co-sponsor on this resolution. And as a matter of fact, I was staff to the Assembly in 1989 when 370 was being revised, and they did it right back then. They took their time, they had all the stakeholders at the table, and then before they brought it to the Assembly, they made sure that every T was crossed and I was dotted, and then they brought it to the Assembly for a vote, unlike what's happening now. It just really disturbs me that we can spend as much time as we did on Title 21, and mind you, Title 21 is really, really important for the development of our growing community. We spent 10 years plus on Title 21 and a month or so on this very important and complex ordinance. How dare my colleagues think that this resolution isn't a good idea? It's the only right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There is no one else in the queue, so please vote. And Ms. Johnston? That motion fails 6-5. We are going to adjourn for our dinner at this time.
You don't mean adjourn.
Pardon? I mean, I'm sorry. We're going to break for our dinner. I call our regular meeting back to order, and we are at Assembly Appearance Request, and we have a request from Robert Bassett. And Robert, due to the young people that you've got here to introduce, I'm going to give you 5 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's wonderful news. And I'm going to call forth the young people right now so that we don't waste a lot of time with movement. So why don't you come on up here. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Robert C. Bo Bassett, and I have the privilege of being a volunteer trainer in implementing the Alaska Points of Light Youth Leadership Institute. This, again, is our 16th year of a national leadership training to develop young people as community leaders that help and improve the community. Every year, we've had at least one institute for 16 years and have had over 750 graduates since 1998. This year's class is pretty amazing because they committed their 5 days during spring break, which was March 11th to the 15th, instead of vacationing and staying in bed and texting. And by the way, there was no texting during the training. Think about that, being free from that. They engaged in the week of training, did an excellent job with a very diverse group, ranging in age from 13 to 30, grades 8 through the university. And we have tonight representation from the class. I'll have them speak a little bit about who they are, their school, a little bit about their experience. And Mr. E.J. Tung was a graduate assistant. He'll say a few words. And then I've asked Ms. Crystal Bankhead to say a couple words about her brother. Crystal's a 2005 graduate of the Points of Light Youth Leadership Institute. Okay, to lead us off, Brianna.
Good afternoon. My name is Brianna Bennett Kelly. I'm an 8th grader at Peckers Middle School. Over the spring break, I spent my week at Pili Prudential Youth Leadership Institution. I think it was a really great experience to learn about leadership and to learn how to be a leader in the community. I would recommend this program to every young person that wants to do better for their community. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Sabais, and I'm a freshman at East High School. I spent 3 days at Pili, and the experience was great, and I learned a lot. And I'm really glad for the opportunity, and I would recommend it to anybody. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kobe, and I'm 8th grader at Raven K-12 school, and my experience with Pili was pretty fun. I get to meet new friends, and thanks.
Hi, my name is Carissa Jean. I'm a junior at Bartlett High School. So I am an introvert when it comes to coming to engage with a group. Well, Pili has helped me become more of an extrovert, taking part roles of exercises and leading people off at some point. So Pili is a really good opportunity for those of you who are introverted and are really shy but are really brilliant inside, and I definitely encourage this program and be recommended to young folks.
Hi everyone, my name's Joe Tung. I go to Mears Middle School. Really, I learned a lot throughout this program, and I had a great time, and the skills that I've learned here will probably help me for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mai Bing, a sophomore at Bartlett High School. Through this training, I learned a lot about how to communicate with different kind of people, and even they're not the same culture as you, but I learned a lot.
I'd like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity and coming to speak today. My name is E.J. Tung. I'm a junior at Diamond High School. This is my second year coming back to Pili as a graduate assistant. I learn something new every year coming to Pili. At first, when I came, my first year as a graduate assistant, thought I had everything in the bag, thought I knew everything already. I had the basics down from the first year. I had all the lessons down, but coming back as a graduate assistant, you really get a new perspective of looking at things. The way I see it, step one is actually going through as a student, and the real learning occurs when you come back and help share your experiences with others and help teach them what you learned the year prior. It was just a really great experience. It's really a great program. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Crystal Bankhead. I was a 2005 graduate of the PILI program. I'm just grateful for the PILI program. I can assure you the skills that you're learning now, you certainly will use later on in life. I'm now working for 9-Star Education and Employment Services, continuing to help my community, and this is really only the beginning for me. So I'm very grateful for the PILI program, and I thank you all for supporting the program.
I'm Captain Tim Smith. I'm the pastor at the Salvation Army's Community Center here in Anchorage, and it's been our privilege to partner with the PILI program this year. And I just have to tell you what a marvelous experience it's been to see firsthand the transformation that's taken place in the lives of these young people, and to see the amazing growth and the amazing community investment that and the heart that they have to make a difference in our community. I just want to commend them and this program to you as well.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to all of you. Mr. Hornman.
I think somebody wanted to get a group picture. Somebody can come up front if you'd like real quick and get a picture in front of the podium as a class if you like, or as a group. I saw some people trying to get in there. And while they're doing that, I noticed that quite a few of the attendees this year from Bartlett High School over in the East Anchorage area, and East High School as well, so congratulations.
Thank you. We're now going to move into items under old business. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to change the order of the day to take up item 14E. It's a new public hearing that won't take up much time. Can somebody second it, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, item 14E is before us, and that is AO number 46, an ordinance approving acquisition of real property at 1040 East First Avenue for a purchase price not to exceed $2,852,000 plus closing cost, and waiving the public facility site selections requirements of Title 21. This item is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Regarding this issue, there's one last chance you have to change your minds and
You're not speaking on the topic.
My name. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you.
Pardon? No. Are you speaking on this item that's before the body?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
On the purchase of a property?
Agenda 21. It's related to Agenda 21.
No, this isn't Title 21. This is in regards to acquisition of a property by M&L&P.
Number 21 was one of the last numbers you said, I believe.
I said it was
you said 21.
Waiving some site selections that are under that. Has nothing to do with the Title 21.
Why is it under if it's not?
Sir, it's not on topic. We're on acquisition of a piece of property.
It's the last chance. Save this city, please. You too.
Yeah. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body. Mr. Flynn?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for the administration. I saw the email that came across yesterday regarding this property, and the issue that was raised by one of my colleagues was as to some of the environmental attachments. Could you just help us understand what mitigation factors we're putting in place to protect ourselves from the environmental liabilities associated with this property?
I'll let Mr. Posey go ahead and address that, primarily because he entered into a contract with the
He's in
environment.
trouble if it doesn't work out? Yeah.
Yeah.
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, specifically, I guess you're asking the question about how we protected ourselves through the legal department. They did an analysis along with our environmental people. Basically, anyone who owned the property and had any impact is responsible for their pollution, contamination. The MOA is on the hook for anything that may have happened prior to that date, and we are on the hook for anything that we may or may have done. So we are protected as MOA in this purchase by prior agreements as explained by the documents that you received. So do you have a specific question, I guess, is more?
Okay, well, let's go back just a moment here. I either misheard you or you misspoke. Anything that happened prior to the purchase is the responsibility of the previous responsible party, not MOA, correct?
I didn't hear your last piece.
We are not on the hook for anything that has happened prior to the purchase. Am I correct?
If I could, let me go ahead and address that. That property's been there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
We are aware of some contamination that occurred from the current owners. In the agreement, they will cure their problem. There has been many things that's occurred over the years that was outside the control of the current owners, which may have impacted that site. And I guess that's basically the best way that I can address it. What this does, that this does protect the municipality by this purchase.
Well, thank you, Mr. Posey. You can sit down unless somebody else has questions for you. I'll just make a couple of comments here, and my colleagues can vote how they choose. Don't know if any of you have been through a CERCLA investigation. Colonoscopies are more pleasant. I'm not satisfied with the answers that we received, that we will avoid something like that in the future. I'm not going to vote for it.
Just a moment. I've got you in the queue, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Osiander?
I have two questions. The first one, I guess, is still on the contamination. I thought that I had read in here that when we were acquiring this, we were relying on a statement from the state DEC that all the environmental cleanup for contaminants had been completed. Is that accurate or not accurate? It's on page 2 of the AM.
Right.
Mr. Posey, I'm told by my fellow assembly member that is not accurate. Is it accurate or not?
I think that through the chair, Ms. Osiander, Mr. Flynn understands CERCLA and knows that the deepest pockets in prior ownership and or prior contamination are responsible. The responsible parties for what was done by this owner and previous owner or lessee is covered by an agreement, and they will pick up those costs for anything that has to be done.
Is there additional costs that the municipality will incur because of environmental contamination of this site?
Because of how we have decided to buy this, we are saying that it is now going to be covered by keeping anyone else, third parties, from coming in and asking the state or the city more particularly the city, to do anything. This purchase protects the city, I guess is the cleanest way of saying that.
Well, it appears to me that maybe we're doing the wrong thing by waiving 21.15.015. What is the rationale for the request to waive that section of Title 21?
That's Title 21 on selection through the chair, and this property is adjacent to ML&P, and therefore basically is by far the best piece of property of existing buildings for us to buy at this time.
Is there some kind of time constraint? Why couldn't you go through the process?
The time constraint is, through the chair, Ms. Osiander, is that this deal through the Heritage Bank, negotiated with our lawyers for the city, closes on April 2nd.
I'm hoping that Mr. Vakelis could, or somebody could respond. Since you've apparently been negotiating for a while, why didn't you go through the site selection process prior to this date?
Mr. Vakelis? And I've got Mr. Wheeler in the queue. Mr. Whoever. Mr. Wheeler?
Through the chair, Ms. Osiander, the site selection process, as you know, is used for such things as fire stations and so on, where you're trying to pick the best location. It was the administration's determination here, along with ML&P, that this was the location right next to their current facilities. So therefore, going through a site selection process to acquire property somewhere else in town wasn't appropriate.
But we appear to have unanswered questions of cost, which is fairly significant in determination of a site.
Through the chair, Ms. Osiander, your question regarding potential future cost is addressed by owning and controlling the property. By controlling the property, we can largely mitigate the potential for cleanup costs in the future. Whereas if this property is sold to a third party and the third party decides they want to dig a hole in the ground and comes across additional contamination, as a PRP or potential responsible party, we have no control over how that's done or what those costs might be or what kind of litigation we get dragged into. But by controlling the property, we largely mitigate that risk.
I feel more comfortable if it wasn't largely, but if it was, yes, it will completely.
20, 30 years from now, if the ML&P decides that they've got to tear down that building and build something new, then that's a conversation we could have. But at the moment, under current plans for the foreseeable future, we won't be digging in the ground, and therefore we can avoid that issue.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Posey if he will be increasing our commercial papers to pay for the generation now that will be using this 2.8 out of the commercial paper.
Through the chair, Ms. Johnson, it hadn't been decided. We have cash on hand as well as commercial paper possibilities for paying for this. It's just part of our capital program. Our capital program is usually done 50-50 or sometimes 100% cash and out of our own reserves as opposed to commercial paper. It depends on what money is available at the time.
So you don't see this as any impact on our commercial paper?
No more impact than we have for all of our capital programs, ma'am.
So you won't be coming back to us for an additional...
Through the chair, no, it will not be.
I just want to make my comments now. This was referred to the Enterprise Committee. I have to say that it was well over a week that I actually sent some very simple questions to ML&P to be answered, and I just received those answers on Monday. So I was disappointed. I'm also quite disappointed that we only had a 2-week window for this. I'm not quite sure why the administration initiated a letter of intent that has such a short window, or why they didn't come to us earlier. I'm not sure why this 2 weeks. That all being said, I will be a very, very, very reluctant yes vote. Thank you.
Ms. Frasca?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have some questions regarding the summary of economic effects. Jim, do you have that handy?
No, I don't, but Rick has it. Rick Miller?
So my first question is regarding, it says that you're going to have operating revenues as a result of this purchase. So could you explain what those are?
Page 3. Through the chair, Assembly Member Frasca, yes, as we add this land and building to our rate base, and the next time we file a rate case, we'll get a return on that. About 8.7% is our weighted cost of capital, or the rate of return we'll get on that property. We'll also get a dollar for dollar recovery of all the allowable operating expenses.
So you're going to increase your revenues as a result of spending the $2.8 million. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And so is that offset by, you say, building improvements are going to cost $630,000, and plus some more that you can't yet quantify, because you have either the O&M on existing buildings that will be vacated in the future has not been included in the C. So you have $635,000 in costs that aren't included in your expenses, the summary of expenses. And then do you have any estimates of what your additional costs will be associated with? It sounds like you're going to be moving people around. Is that what you're going to be doing, but you don't know yet?
The sprinkler system that we're going to put into that building, and the seller is putting in a 6-inch water line at his cost and taking care of any contaminated soils. That, along with any remodeling work we do in that building, will be capitalized. So we'll go into rate base, and we'll get a return on that.
Okay. So you mean you're passing the cost on to ratepayers, correct?
Just like we do with any prudent investment
But I
we
don't
make.
think that's necessarily a reason why you shouldn't have to explain what you're going to be spending the money on or what the costs are going to be. So you've said $635,000. You've identified here or referenced.
Yes.
But then what about the other costs associated with buildings that will become vacant? Does that mean there's going to be a savings because you're going to vacate buildings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we're up on Government Hill. We plan to sell or get out of that building.
So that could be a positive, some return on revenue.
Right.
Okay. And then will there be relocation costs of the employees?
We actually had $25,000 in the C as basically a cost to move staff into this new building.
Okay. And I do see up here in the total operating expenses regarding Jennifer Johnston's question that it does have commercial paper bank fees. So, but yet you don't know if you're going to use commercial paper?
I highly encourage us to use commercial paper. We have $180 million of commercial paper availability. We've issued $100 million to date. And the biggest piece of the commercial paper program is actually the letter of credit, where we're paying 58 to 61 basis points. The paper itself, the last two sales have been at 23 basis points.
Mr. Miller, I'm not arguing with you. I was just referencing the answer that was to Ms. Johnston, which wasn't quite that clear.
As a CFO for ML&P, I highly encourage us to use the commercial paper program.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Harleman?
I think some of the questions just get answered, but basically, you plan on renovating this building so that you can move some staff from either an aging building or one that you want to try to get rid of. Makes sense to me. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries 7-4. We are now back to item 11A under old business, which is AM number 3. Subject is the 2013-2014 liquor licenses.
Move to approve.
And second. Yes, we're discussing In and Out Bush Liquor. Mr. Harleman?
Yes. Just the research that we've done references property. This item came before the Public Safety Committee intending to have discussions reference community complaints and concerns, and we were looking at adopting or modifying their conditional use. We turned to find out that this particular property, when the borough annexed into the municipality at the turn of the 70s, this was one of those that did not, it had a grandfathered conditional use, so it was not or did not necessitate at that time the conditional use to continue to operate. So we are working with legal to meet those concerns, and in the meantime, we have passed a period of time to protest, so this particular license should be approved, and we'll continue to search the resolution to address the community concerns. And I urge approval.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries 10-1. We now have before us item 11B, AO number 37, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 3.70, Employees' Relations with comprehensive updates securing long-term viability and financial stability of employee and labor relations. This item is before the body.
Move
of order,
to
Mr.
approve
Chairman.
DS2.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Trainee?
The body cannot move to vote on this issue. The requirement to take public testimony has not been satisfied as guaranteed in Anchorage Charter, Article 2, Section 10, Alaska Statutes, AS 29.20.020, sir.
Mr. Trainee, I rule that incorrect testimony has been received on this item.
I appeal the ruling of the chair, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We need to take a vote. Please vote. Let the clerk set it.
Can we have some debate on this, Mr. Chairman, or no debate?
You know, Mr. Trainee, I'd be interested in hearing from you on this, being as how it's one of your cases that...
No, it's not one of my cases. What I did was not let a gentleman testify on his second bite at the apple. In this case, we had 210 people approximately out there that had not yet testified. None of them were identified as second bite at the apple, sir. And that's what Mr. Wheeler references in his opinion to us.
Okay. Mr. Horniman?
Mr. Chairman, I earlier made the resolution to postpone and give us more time, and I'm certain that we could have had a more collaborative process to do that. That didn't pass. My concern then falls with litigation, perhaps, that this municipality will face because we didn't follow the charter and state statutes. And based upon the opinion and concerns voiced by the ACLU, and of course seeing members and constituents waiting to testify, many of whom have sent their comments, but still stating that they expressed a desire to testify. I'm very concerned as well. I think, again, we're moving way too fast. There is no fire. There is no emergency. I believe we should continue this process.
Ms. Osiander?
I'll tell you, I really looked at the rules on closing off testimony a summer ago. If you remember the summer of testimony.
I was here for that one, ma'am.
All right.
That was you.
Well, I just want to tell you, there is no specific rule that says you have to let people speak indefinitely. Let me finish, Mr. Trainee, if I could. The chair has already said that he is going to be meeting or working with the ACLU and interested parties to set up a rule, but it is entirely the prerogative of the chair with the ability of the body to overrule on the speaking. At this point, the S2 version is exactly the same topics as were included in the original version, and as such, I firmly believe there has been the opportunity to testify aloud. Now, if you recall, I did vote with you on Mr. Honeman's proposal because I personally would like to have more time to delve into it. But I do not think that we can stop this at this point with the rationale given that there was not opportunity for public testimony, because that's not true.
Okay, Mr. Trainee, one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is we're arbitrary and capricious, and when this goes to court, I do not want us to be sued and paid lots of money when we simply could have got around that by listening to people's testimony. It's not that many more people to testify on this issue, sir.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I fully support Mr. Trainee's position, and I agree with him 100%. And it saddens me to think that if we don't allow everybody in this community to testify, we're going to face some really serious lawsuits. And I'm a taxpayer, too, and I really don't want to be paying for any lawsuits unnecessarily. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote on overriding the decision of the chair.
Clarify what a yes vote is and a no vote.
No vote is to not override, yes is to override. Ms. Johnston?
No.
That motion fails 7-4.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Mr. Horniman?
I move to postpone this ordinance indefinitely.
Seeing Mr. Horniman?
I know Ms. Osiander was just concerned when I moved to postpone this at the beginning, and I noted, Ms. Osiander, about the concerns and the dangers of doing so. And, you know, I'm concerned. I think we're going the wrong direction here. I really think that we have time to work through this that makes sense. I firmly believe that we are going into area. I am supportive of change. I'm supportive of change of this labor law, the collective bargaining 3.70. I think we can do this. I know we can do this much better, much more smartly. And I think we owe ourselves no less time than a past body had when they were looking at some of the concerns that they had at that time. And Ms. Osiander, I appreciate your advice back when it was first motioned and introduced. I feel just as passionate today as I did then. I'm not afraid to making changes, and I'm not afraid to angering or disappointing someone in the labor workforce. I'm not. But I think we can do this much better. I think we're much more smartly about it if we take our time. I urge your support.
Ms. Osiander?
Recognizing that passion, Mr. Horniman, unfortunately in a legislative body, minority doesn't have the ability to stop a majority discussing a topic. But I appreciate your point. Thank you, sir.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
No.
That motion fails 7-4. The item is back before us. I see no one in the queue. Mr. Birch?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to be added as a co-sponsor to the S2 version, please.
Mr. Flynn?
I've more or less kept my peace on this. I've gone through one version, second version, third version, and a fourth version. I'll be honest with you, I really don't care what's in any of them. It could be as brilliantly written as the Magna Carta, or as scurrilous as the sedition amendments to the Espionage Act. But I, having reviewed it, can tell you it doesn't really come close to either. I know that history is a little bit esoteric to some of the people here tonight, so I'll try and localize it a little bit. Several years ago, as Ms. Osiander alluded to, we were facing unending testimony, it seemed. And my friend and former colleague, Dan Coffey, who I saw skulking around the press room earlier tonight, came to me and suggested that we move to conclude public testimony. Yes. And I demurred, and we didn't, and everybody who wanted to be heard was. More recently, some of the members of this body moved to pull the Title 21 rewrite from the Planning and Zoning Commission so that we could take final action on it. I voted against that. In both of those cases, had I done something differently, I might have achieved a political result that was closer to my philosophical preferences. But, as you know, I tend to stand on process and doing what's right. And, of course, I've been often the lone voice on this body protesting the outrageous and inappropriate reapportionment process governed by a minority of this body out of the public view. My point to all this is that sometimes we reasonably, myopically focus on what's in front of us because it's what's in front of us. And when we do that, we fail to grasp that we have a larger responsibility, not just to the people we represent, although that's the most important one, but also to the integrity of this body, this assembly, as an institution. And we have failed badly. The decision to close public testimony prematurely has irrevocably harmed our public process. Stop it. Stop it. Guys, I appreciate it. Really, this is not the time for that, okay? We couldn't even get this thing introduced correctly. You may recall Ms. Osiander and I abstained from the vote on introducing it because you don't vote on introducing. You simply need 3 motions. Now, I'm not perfect. I am sure that in my political career, I have tried to take a shortcut. And I'm proud to say I learned from my mistakes. I'm not expecting to change anyone's mind here tonight. I know where the votes are. And I really hope that each of you, when you cast your vote, understand what you're doing. Because someday you'll reap what you have sown. And what is politically expedient today will hurt you tomorrow. Best of luck.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote.
Mr. Chairman?
This is the S2. That's the motion that Mrs. Frasca made.
We had some amendments.
I thought we had some amendments to make.
Nobody, you didn't queue?
I had no one in the queue.
He's been pushing like crazy. We have a lot of electronics. Seriously, sir, he's got some amendments.
Can you reset see if we can get the board reset? But I've had no one come up in the queue. Okay, who's got, Mr. Honeman?
Yes. I have 2 amendments I'd like to introduce. The problem is, Mr. Chairman, because of the confusion of what we're getting, the S2 version that I had downloaded from what we were sent has changed a tad, so the lines are off. I'm over here trying to make the corrections for my amendments. So I have 2. I'll pass them down. The first one, will be found in the S2 version that we were delivered tonight, page 10, line 8, following section B, to insert the language that you'll read and you'll see as you get to you. Section C, nothing in 3.70.040 shall be interpreted to preclude negotiation over equipment, staffing, scheduling, safety, and overtime. And I have further discussion if you like.
Second.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes, sir. To my colleagues, if you recall and I can't recall exactly which work session we were in. We've had a few, but the latest one, as I recall, was just reinforced that I believe Mr. Earnhardt is the person who I can attribute the quote to, that staffing, scheduling, overtime, and equipment will still be bound items for negotiation. So if that is the case, there should be no concern that we reinforce that within the law. I'm concerned that what I've been kind of waving the flag on all along is that we can't say one thing in law and then turn around and say, well, but we don't have to follow the law. It doesn't make sense to me. So if we can put the language in that if we're saying that we're going to allow these things to be negotiated, there's no reason why it shouldn't be in there. It's fairly simple language, Mr. Chairman.
Can we get this word reset?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Osander?
Mr. Honeman, unfortunately, it appears that you're wanting to put it under the section under the Employee Relations Board, which I would suggest is not the correct section.
And I may be in the wrong page then. Yeah, the one that we got late in the day on Friday.
Okay. Well, you may want.
Page 10, line 8.
Page 10 on my S2 is under employee relations. All right, that's on page 9 for me here. Pardon me?
Through the chair, Mr.
Up there. Okay, got it. Sorry, it's under the management rights section. Mr.
Yes,
Hunter.
it's the tail
Got
end
it.
of management rights.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
This just further illustrates the confusion, Mr. Chairman. I apologize to my
No, that was my fault. I looked at the wrong C. I got it now.
Okay, do I have anyone else in the queue? Yes. Okay, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm having a hard time with all these documents. I really am, and it's really not fair, but I'm going to do the best I can. Okay, my first amendment.
We have to vote on this.
We've got an amendment on the floor, Ms. Jackson, Ms. Gray Jackson.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Trainee, Mr. Honeman.
Okay. Anyone else to speak to the amendment on the floor?
No worries.
Seeing, hearing none, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
No.
That motion fails 6-5. Mr. Horniman, you had another?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure that's going to make any difference, but I'm going to try one more. And I'll pass along. I'm trying to correct the page and the section number here. There's two more this way. I've got a few more coming your way. Well, I'll just pass these down, and you'll have to make the appropriate change on the line. So it'll be on page 32, line 15. Page 32, line 15 in the S2 version that we received tonight. It would be replacing the language that's underscored and bolded with the time limits. Essentially, I'm sorry, not replacing. It'd be just in front of. I'm sorry. I'll say that again. On page 32, line 15, in front of the language that is underscored and bolded. No municipal employee will suffer a loss of pay or benefits as a result of changes to this chapter. Can I get a second? Second. And I've got a comment, brief comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Horniman.
I go back to, again, work sessions, questions that were asked at multiple times by members of this body, including myself. Mr. Birch asked it last, this past Friday work session. He wanted clarification from Mr. Earnhardt, and the answer was, even from the mayor himself, who to the media has said that I don't know what the concern is all about, because nobody here is going to suffer a loss of pay or benefits as a result of change of this chapter. And if that's so, I say there should be no concern over adding that into the code.
Mr. Trombley.
Question to the administration. On page, appreciate the amendment, Mr. Honeman. On page 8 of 33, when we have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, where it says that, I won't read verbatim, but basically if you've achieved longevity pay, service rec, education pay, and other incentives that current eligible employees who have obtained that will maintain that. So that's the first question, is this redundant with that language that's already in the ordinance? And then secondly, does it contradict other aspects of the ordinance when it comes to the administration wanting to do change in benefits programs such as streamlining or providing the same benefits packages to all municipal employees? So if we have that language in there and then we add this amendment that there will be no loss of pay or benefits, does that also contradict that language that's already in there?
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, I believe we don't have a written version of Mr. Honeman's amendment, but if I followed the way...
Hold on.
I thought I had enough copies, sorry. Just send it down.
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, while we have stated that changes proposed in this ordinance do not have a direct impact, the policy guidance in this ordinance is that we make changes. For example, there has been an express discussion about changing the way overtime is done so that overtime is at time and a half and not something else. So you're setting up a scenario where the policy guidance in the ordinance contradicts this proposed amendment, and it may be very difficult to try to weave through that contradiction.
Okay. So make sure I understand you is that one of the, and we're just going to use this as an example, is the double, eliminating the ability for double overtime. Is that if somebody right now works a swing shift on their second day off and they're now eligible for double overtime, by passing this amendment, you're still allowing that individual to obtain overtime, even though there's other aspects in this ordinance that attempt to eliminate that from happening. So this amendment contradicts other aspects in the ordinance.
Yes, sir, and in that scenario, the change won't actually happen until a new contract is put into place. But this amendment contradicts the policy guidance that the Assembly gives us through passage of this ordinance to make that happen through negotiation and through the process of developing that new contract. So that's an example where you have a contradiction between the amendment and the ordinance itself.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
Mr. Birch?
Yeah, I would speak against this amendment. I think we clearly had a report where we had, and again, discussing the overtime aspects, that rewriting how negotiations happen with overtime. We have where overtime is assigned by seniority. We've had some excessive overtime, and that may change under this. So I think it would unreasonably complicate and contradict internally. So I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Horniman?
I think I can clear this up. How about we insert in front of and after and before pay, so no employee will suffer a loss of base pay or benefits as a result of changes to this chapter. I need a second. And Mr. Chairman,
was that seconded? I'm sorry.
Yes.
It was. Okay.
Who was the second?
Ms. Frasca.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm failing to see the concern here when we've heard our mayor speak publicly on the website, in the media. Mr. Birch himself made comments this past Friday that he was addressing emails and phone calls he's getting from concerned employees and others, I believe is the words he said, the concern that they would take substantial losses, and that isn't exactly true, is it? And he asked that of the administration, and Mr. Earnhardt's answer was, no. You're absolutely right, Mr. Birch. So, Mr. Birch, when it comes to overtime, I suspect you're going to find that, regardless of seniority, that you're going to find that a detective on the homicide unit or in a crimes against children or special victims unit, there's only so many people to go around, and they're going to go out to every one of those calls. They're not going to just give it to just anybody in the queue, or they could get to pick who they choose. So you're going to find that if we have 20 homicides, the same team members are going to go out to those homicides, and that overtime is going to rack up. And if it's a time and a half, if that's what we're trying to get at, that's not a problem. We can negotiate that, but if you want to put it in code, I'm okay with that. I'm not opposed to changes, Mr. Birch, or my colleagues. But this is something that has been oft repeated by members of the administration, including council.
Ms. Frasca?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the work session, I also asked that same question of the administration to be clear that what was in AO 37 would not impact current wages. And the answer was that was correct. And so I recognize, though, that going forward, the collective bargaining process will have an impact on future wages and benefits. But as specified in AO 37, these changes, that's what I heard at the work session. So as a result, I support this amendment.
Okay. Mr. Horniman, You're done. I see no one else in the queue. We are voting on the amendment to Mr. Horniman's amendment, changing suffer a loss of base pay. Is that correct, Mr. Horniman?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make clear for the record, because we're going to have a number of negotiations over the next 2 years, that the Assembly understands that what will happen is that there may be changes in benefits, there may be changes in base rates for wages, there may be changes in overtime and how that's viewed, as well as other forms of compensation to employees. All of that will and may happen either to the employee's benefit or maybe changes to which the employee may say that's a loss, whether it's a loss in benefits or wages. So I just want to make it clear that this is that even if this amendment passes, it's no guarantee that the base wages they receive today, the benefits they receive, and all the other forms of compensation are going to remain unchanged going forward.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So then the bottom line is the fears of our municipal workforce of losing pay is really a reality, folks. That's the bottom line. It's a reality, and that's another reason why we need to trash this ordinance today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Starr.
Chair? Mr. Chair?
I got you in the queue, Ms. Johnston.
Thank you.
Mr. Horniman, you're inserting it right after language in the current ordinance that's presented. It says, this ordinance does not amend, alter, or void any of the negotiated terms of existing collective bargaining agreements for the current terms of said agreements. And then you want to strengthen the language by saying you're wanting us to preserve the wages and benefits during the time frame before the next contract comes up. Is that what you're after?
That's correct.
Why don't you just add the word, base pay behind the word alter or something more clear? You're adding a conflicting statement to the terms and the length. And I guess the intention of where you stuck it in Section 3 says, I think it's a fair gone conclusion that bargaining will occur. It's just nothing's going to change in terms of what your concerns are between now and the next contract, whatever bargaining you're talking about. So it just seems that you could do it with several words. You could say, does not amend, alter, or change base rate of pay, comma, or void any negotiated terms. And I'd be happy with that. So I can't vote the way you've worded it, but I surely could if the intention is just as you said, to protect that concern that I've heard as well.
Mr. Horniman, I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. I've got Mayor Sullivan, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple comments. At the work sessions and during the course of the deliberation of this ordinance, the main concern that I received, that I responded to, was, is the passage of this going to immediately affect anybody who's currently in service rec, performance incentive pay, somebody who has an educational enhancement? Because the worry was that all of a sudden those are going to go away. And what we said was anybody who's already earned those will not see a reduction in those. If you've got an education degree and it gave you an 8% raise, that does not go away with the passage of this. New employees coming on board that want to get, or even existing employees that want to get an enhancement, it will have to relate to the workforce or the job they're doing to actually enhance their job skills. So that was the main concern, was that somehow we were going to be taking away something that was already earned. But as Mr. Earnhardt explained at the work session, I think Mr. Wheeler explained, every new contract is a negotiation, and you may negotiate something lower in exchange for something higher. You may want to change a classification. I mean, that's all subject to negotiation, so you don't want to put in an ordinance that you're never going to change a wage rate. It could change in exchange for something else, and it could end up to the employee's benefit. So it's not So anyway, that's why I think it's very, very dangerous to put specifically in code that you'll never change a base rate, because that's what negotiation's about.
Okay, Ms. Johnston, I'm going to get to you, but I'm going to finish up with Mr. Horniman and Mr. Starr. All right, well.
Look, if I could just a few more moments. I think it's fairly clear what I'm trying to get at is to answer the concerns that we've all heard, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's adequate, but Ms. Johnson had some.
Okay. Ms. Johnston.
Excellent. I think my question was answered. I was concerned as far as, I agree with the intent of this motion, but I'm concerned where it leaves us as far as negotiations, as far as if the members or the unions do want to negotiate different benefits or different enhancements than what currently, how that would affect a current employee. Also, if a current employee was doing a position that their base rate was higher, and then after this ordinance passed, they stopped being involved in that unit. So that was my concern. So if there could be something, I kind of like where Mr. Starr is going.
Okay. Mr. Honeman?
I think that we could get to, would probably satisfy everybody if we added after that then, except by approval of the assembly. That way, if there's a negotiation that comes forward between now and the time the collective bargaining units are over, it should come to us anyway, and we'd have to approve it.
Is that an amendment, Mr. Honeman, or is that a question to Mr. Starr?
So we would add at the end, comma, except by approval of the assembly. Need a second.
Second.
Ms. Osiander?
You're going to have to be clearer, because that's not an amendment to the amendment you just made. That's a separate amendment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
do you
want us to deal with the one you made
please.
first?
Yes, please.
And then deal with that one,
Yes,
maybe?
please.
That would be...
Okay. Any other comment on the amended amendment, changing or adding in the word base? Everybody understand? Please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Oh, I thought that motion passes 10-1. Ms. Gray Jackson, let's see, we've got it amended.
We've got an amended amendment.
Yeah, amended. Now we're back voting on the amended motion. Any comment?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend this motion to add a comma after the end to change this chapter instead of a period, comma, except by approval of the assembly.
Second.
Mr. Trombley?
No, not to speak to this amendment.
Okay.
But to the amendment to the
Mr. Honeman?
That's it.
Mr. Starr?
When would we want to approve a loss of base pay and benefits?
I'm trying to answer the concerns that Mr. Wheeler had and the mayor just pointed out. What if?
Well, a letter of agreement is our normal process now, so we see those.
3.70, Mr.
We see those. Well, I guess where you've stuck the language is that, it says you'll not suffer a loss of pay or benefits except if approved by the assembly. So what are they going to do? Tender us a loss? I guess I don't see that occurring, Mr. Honeman. But
I didn't either, Mr. Starr. I thought the language was clear enough, but.
Well, you can't with Section 13 language or Section 3 language that already says that no current contract will be amended or voided as a result of this action. So you've got overriding language that you'd have to do it by a letter of agreement through a negotiated process. That puts us firmly into negotiating a contract, and that's a place I would rather not go. Let the letter of agreement be negotiated and bring us back that. So it's just, I think, your concerns are valid, but you're well protected. And if we're not careful, we're going to mess up the language that protects the negotiated items in current contracts. So thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This confusion on the floor is just another visible reason why we should not move on with this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we now have a...
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Ms. Johnston.
It's from being on the phone, but so with this amendment, Mr. Hahnemann, are you trying to address that if they came back with a new negotiated contract, this amendment would address that?
Yes.
And Mr. Stern, you're concerned having this language in, because of that? I was thinking it was more about negotiated contracts versus letters of agreement.
Well, Ms. Johnson, where he's inserted the language, it follows the intent to protect the current contracts. And so I guess my illustration is that if there's a new negotiated contract or a new letter of agreement, we're bound to have to approve that anyhow. So to insert language that says we'll approve it seems redundant, especially when it's attached to language that specifies only a loss. And I'm just not sure that that's something that we would ever see in front of us. So I think the language is strong enough as it's written in the ordinance to talk about not amending current contract or current negotiated items in current contracts. That's my only point is why clutter it up with assembly approval of some modification to a contract. Letter of agreement is how you do that.
Okay, I've got no one else in the queue. We are voting on the amendment that adds except, I'm sorry, give me that.
Except by approval of the assembly. It'll be a comma after a change of this chapter, and then except by approval of the assembly.
Okay, that is the amendment to this amendment that we're voting on. Please vote. Ms. Johnston?
No.
That motion fails 6-5. We are back to the original amendment as amended. Any comment? Anyone? If not, please vote on the amendment as amended. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries 8-3. Ms. Gray-Jackson, did you have an amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 amendments, and hopefully, since things have changed consistently, I'll be placing them on the right page. But the first one is page 3, line 14 through 21. Delete all material. Let me pass this out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And insert confidential employee has the meaning and shall be interpreted in accordance with the 29 U.S.C. 151169, which is the National Labor Relations Act, as amended, the regulations adopted under those sections, and any decisions interpreting the above. And if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I have before me the actual Supreme Court language. The Supreme Court has identified 2 categories of confidential employees who are excluded from the NLRA's protection: employees who assist and act in a confidential capacity to persons who formulate, determine, and effectuate management policies in the field of labor relations, and it goes on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hahnemann?
You know, this one, and I thank my colleague for bringing this out, because I had this question, and I think it was Ms. Mahoney that might have answered it from the administration, was, does that mean the payroll clerks at each of the, I guess, field units, departments outside of the municipality, City Hall, that the payroll clerks who simply by collecting the data, that they become not members of, or that they essentially be told they cannot be represented employees? And I don't find the logic in that to even be sound, because they're not typically policymakers. They're simply collecting data. They're inputting it or making sure that it gets amended as necessary. It's more of a, lack of better terms, a technical administrative detail rather than a policy-making advisory role. Probably about the most they're going to get in advisory is if a commander or a manager or supervisor comes up and wants clarification, they can give their interpretation, but the chances are, if their manager's smart at all, and I know they're usually pretty good, they're going to get that information from the higher authority. So I think this one here, actually, I haven't seen the actual Supreme Court ruling, but it seems to make sense. So I'd support it.
Mr. Trombley?
To the administration, confidential employees, one of the things that I've consistently heard and that I am troubled by is that, and this was especially at the work session on Friday, is that we look at confidential employee and we say, okay, if it's, and I forgive me if I'm not getting the terminology right, but let's say a sergeant goes in and he says, okay, police sergeant says, okay, you guys, you're going here today, and you guys, you're going to patrol that area. Now, what I'm told is that doesn't, now, technically, that person is, directing, whose duties, they're directing, I just answered my own question. Never mind.
Mr. Birch?
Yeah, I think the language that's included there in lines 14 through 21 is clear. We did discuss that at the work session. I think it speaks to exactly what a confidential employee is, and I think it's better to have the specific language in there than just simply referencing a case, and speak against the amendment. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
No.
That motion fails 8-3. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My next amendment is on page 32, line 17, and things have changed, but at the end of section 3, insert, nothing in this ordinance shall be construed as restricting the rights of employee organizations or bargaining representatives to collectively bargain over the following topics: wage scales, work rules, seniority, meal periods, leave accruals, premium specialty, and shift differential pay, other pay enhancements, hours of work, shift schedules, overtime eligibility, benefits, tool and clothing allowances, tuition reimbursement, union dues, definition of bargaining unit work, promotions, transfers, demotions, and layoff and recall process. And the reason why I'm bringing this forward is because there were a lot of questions that were asked, and one of them was, what will be left to negotiate? And the answer was, negotiations shall continue on items including wage, scales, work rules, okay, everything I just said. And then the other question was, what is considered a pay enhancement? And the response was, pay enhancements under AMC 370-020H do not include items such as shift differential, acting pay, acting assignments, working out of class, or overtime. And it goes on to say, in answer to that question, the ordinance does not impact probation or annual step advancement within the pay range, nor does AMC 370 eliminate pay enhancements for a job-specific requirement that requires a license or certification to perform for work. And I can go on, but I really would appreciate support from my colleagues on this, because it just makes sense to put this language in the ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
No.
That motion fails 7-4. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 23, line 12, beginning with the words decision, delete all the material and insert, the decision of the arbitrator shall be reduced to writing and shall be final and binding on the parties. The collective bargaining agreement in compliance with the arbitrator's decision shall be prepared and executed by the parties. Collective bargaining agreements awarded through binding interest arbitration must comply must comply with the restrictions outlined in this chapter. Decisions of the arbitrator may be appealed to the Superior Court for the state only for abuse of discretion, fraud, or misconduct on the part of the arbitrator. On appeal to the Superior Court, legal determinations of the Employee Relations Board shall be reviewed de novo by the Superior Court. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
No.
Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Chairman, can we get these handed out before the vote so we can actually have a chance to read them?
Well, that's how we felt about the other version through the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We got to get these. Yep, that was what the mayor asked, is a chance to be able to read this. Or we need to make copies to give to them. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that one. What was that motion fails 7-4. Mr. Honeman?
So I'm not sure if is there any of my colleagues, is there any other amendments I'd like to make comments on before we do the vote?
We're back to the main motion as amended. Mr. Honeman?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, my colleagues, I just want to emphasize again, I'm not opposed to change. I've been in this municipality since June of 1985. I haven't always been represented by labor. In fact, the last position I held prior to elected office, which has its own set of conditions and terms and voted in by the majority of the East Anchorage residents, the last position I had prior to this, I served at the pleasure of the mayor, and it was a phone call away from the job. So I've not always been represented by labor. I was born in a military hospital and grew up in that environment and served myself in the United States Army. So when I say my comments and remarks are, I'm framing those, I'm hopeful that you'll understand where I'm coming when I say these comments, and that is what we're doing is much akin to Mr. Flynn's comments from earlier, and I wasn't sure we were at that point. I thought we had, so thank you for indulging me on the amendments. We're embarking on, in my opinion, we're embarking on a major modification of 3.70 by my recollection, by my estimation, based on what I'm hearing and from what comments that I've seen, is on something that happened 4 or 5 years ago before I even was on this body. And that is to try to swing a pendulum back when I think I heard it from one person saying, yeah, well, I was on the receiving end of a 5-6 vote when I had concerns. Well, to that I say 2 wrongs don't make it right. If I were sitting on the body and someone was trying to get me to make a rush decision without all the information I needed, I wouldn't have liked it either. And my biggest concern as a legislative body, as an independent branch of municipal government, is that we have an opportunity from time to time not only to exercise our own authority and power as a legislative body, to sometimes have to push back, and sometimes we have to shove back. And we haven't done that. We just haven't done that. I saw the votes, I'm looking at the votes, and I'm not naive to think that my comments may even change someone's opinion tonight here at the floor. But I'm making an impassioned plea. I'm forecasting this administration, this mayor leaves in 2 years. He's termed out. Several of my colleagues sitting here tonight, Ms. Osiander, chief amongst you, a couple of weeks you won't be here anymore. Mr. Burt's next year. Who knows? We follow through the terms whether someone will survive. But will this be our legacy? That we all collectively decided, or at least in a majority, decided we've got to make this pendulum change with no real emergency, but because we want to? I don't see the logic in it. I'd urge that you not pass this tonight. I would make the motion to postpone again. I gave a date certain that we would come back to. And I would guarantee you that I would lay my reputation on the line. There wouldn't be a dragged-out, long, debated issue, and perhaps, we can do this collectively and collaboratively. We don't have to do this. So I'm going to vote no, and I urge you that you vote no and send the message. We are an independent body. We are the legislative branch, and we're going to shove back against some rushed crap, and that's what this is, and I apologize for my last comment.
Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few comments before we vote on this thing. I've spent the last few days going through this, Mr. Birch, and I saw you talking about draft documents given to you in 2008. I wasn't on the body then. It was a short little period of time when I wasn't here. Mr. Starr, sorry. Yes, sir. Anyway, you were talking about getting a draft, and that's all we've had here is one draft after the other. The latest version showed up at 4/18 on Friday. This defective process, just as the process you went through, was defective. You know, my grandmother, God rest her soul, used to make a lot of apple pie. She'd always send me out to the orchard to get apples. And she said, if you find one that's rotten, don't pick it, because you can't do anything to make it well again. And what we're doing tonight is we're picking a rotten apple. We can do nothing to make it well. We need to have 180 days or longer to try and put this thing back together and figure out what's the problem we're trying to solve. You know, when you take a look at the back of this thing, Section 4, page 32, it says administration wants 180 days to tell us what they mean by managed competition. You were in a different body at that time where you were told, oh, don't worry, we'll tell you what's in a labor contract, because I know I watched you vote on a copy marked draft. That's what we're doing when the administration is asking 180 days to define managed competition. We should wait until that's fully fleshed out before we vote on this thing. I don't think I'll be on the prevailing side, but I just wish somebody on here would take a hard look at what we're about to do, because we're a bunch of lemmings going off the cliff. And eventually the court will determine that, and this will be thrown back to this body. I'm not sure who's going to be here to deal with the mess we're creating tonight. But if you don't vote no on this, you're creating a mess. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank the mayor and you, Mr. Chairman, and Vice Chair Ms. Johnson for bringing this AO 37 forward, because we can all agree that some changes to the ordinance needed to happen. But you did this the wrong way. You did. You did it in secrecy. You did it without input from the stakeholders, and you did it for political reasons, and that is so wrong. The mayor believes that his ordinance, and he said this more than once, simplifies and clarifies AMC 37, but what it really does, it demoralizes our hardworking men and women who provide the services to our citizens. Many of you forget that these employees also pay property taxes, and they contribute to the Anchorage economy. And the icing on the cake, the use of taxpayers' money to help move this ordinance along, it's simply inappropriate and it's unacceptable. One of the largest issues discussed during the debate was wage and benefits. Ironically, the city's wage and benefit studies have shown that municipal employees are paid at or below market levels. The Anchorage Daily News asked the question to 3 assembly candidates: do you feel city workers are overcompensated, undercompensated, or compensated about right? No offense, Chairman Hall, but you said, quote, that you believe our employers are fairly compensated. And no offense, Vice Chair Johnson, but you said, I feel municipal employees are fairly compensated. So what the heck are we doing having this discussion? Why are we having this discussion? The mayor also stated that the purpose of the ordinance, it's about more than just saving money. He said the goal is to set new standards for bargaining units. Well, in 1989, when I was staff to the Assembly, the goal then was also to set new standards for bargaining units, but it was done the right way, with all the stakeholders at the table, and there was enough time prior to passage to get it right the first time. We should do the same with AO 37. During 15 hours of testimony, there were 1,600 persons who testified. 213 were against the ordinance, and 3 were in support of the ordinance, and another 70 persons on the last day of testimony, with the vast majority against the ordinance. We have all received over 275 emails. 72% of those who wrote to us were against this ordinance, with the other 28% in favor. Although many of those who wrote were either employees, friends, or family members, there were also many citizens who had no ties to any unions who were against this ordinance. They were against this ordinance because they know that this ordinance is going to have an adverse effect on our entire community in one way or another. Much of the testimony was simply asking the Assembly to take a deep breath and don't rush the ordinance just to get it done before the election. If we put this on hold, we can avoid costly litigation, work with the unions, with the public, and produce a document that makes changes to the code, but with consensus from all parties. I personally want to thank each and every one of our employees for the great job they do in serving our public. I also want to apologize to the employees because I personally know what it's like to have your livelihoods put on hold. It's demoralizing. It's a really sad, stressful situation to live through, and I am so sorry that this happened to you. I'm aware that my final plea is probably futile, but I'm asking each and every one of you, elected by the public, many of your very own constituents have asked us to do the right thing. I'm asking you now to put politics and promises you made to one another in the trash. Postpone acting on this ordinance this evening, and in the interest of good public policy, revisit this document with input from everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries 6-5. Yes. We've had a request or a motion to move for immediate reconsideration with a no vote, and we've got a second by Mr. Starr. Please vote.
No.
That motion carries 8-3. We now have before us item 14A, AO number 39, an ordinance determining and approving the total amount of the annual operating budget for the Anchorage District.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm going to stand at ease for 3 minutes.
10 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I can have assembly members take their seats, please. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We now have before us item 14A, AO number 39, an ordinance determining and approving the total amount of the annual operating budget of the Anchorage School District for its fiscal year 2013-2014 and determining that appropriating the portion of the Assembly-approved budget amount to be made available from local sources. This item is before us for public testimony.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have to disclose I may have a potential conflict of interest. My wife is a school teacher. Every year when this comes in front of us, I have to declare that, and it's up to you to decide if I have a conflict of interest.
I do appreciate
school teacher.
I do appreciate you making that declaration, Mr. Tweeney, and I do not find that you have a conflict. So
I'd like for her to make
please
enough that I would have a conflict. Could you talk to the school district for salary? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Hurry up, Richard.
Good evening.
Good evening. I am Anita Baker from Eagle River. Good evening, Assembly members. Recently, I applied for school board seat D. Therefore, I have recently reviewed and analyzed the entire Anchorage School District financial plan for fiscal year 13-14. There are numerous areas that could be reduced without impacting direct classroom instruction. However, it is seriously flawed. The underlying assumptions are overly optimistic. Primarily as the federal cutbacks ripple through the local economy, there will be even greater impacts. Please do not approve the proposed Anchorage School District financial plan for fiscal year 13-14 for the following reasons. This budget was prepared before the U.S. Congress and the President of the United States approved the federal budget for the current fiscal year. This was last week. Finally, the funding reductions are expected to continue for the remainder of the fiscal year. The Office of Management and Budget needs to review and confirm the federal revenues. This budget was prepared before the President of the United States submitted the federal budget for the next fiscal year 14, beginning on October 1st to the U.S. Congress. The funding reductions are expected to continue for the next several years. The Office of Management and Budget needs to review and confirm the federal revenues. This budget was prepared before the governor of the state of Alaska approves the state budget for the next fiscal year. The state funding is expected to remain flat for the next fiscal year. The Office of Management and Budget needs to review and confirm the state revenues. Many of the statewide education programs are partially funded with federal revenues and funds. Therefore, they may also be at a reduced level. Furthermore, this budget was prepared by the previous superintendent, Dr. Browder, and the current school board. On March 30th, this Saturday, the current school board will select a new member to seat D, vacated by Gretchen Guess. Next week, after the municipal elections, there will be 1 or 2 new members on the school board, as well as possibly several new members on the assembly, and also the school bonds will either be passed or not. This budget needs additional funding reductions to prevent the anticipated gap from increasing between projected revenues and expenditures. Recommend reducing the expenditures by $50 million, if not more, not the proposed $25 million. I am available to review and discuss any alternatives to you at your leisure.
Thank you. Mr. Tweeney, are you in the queue?
No, I'm not.
I'm sorry. There are no questions. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chair, Assembly members. My name is Michael Dunsmore. Oh, sorry, a lot of feedback.
I apologize if I'm a little emotional and not put together in this statement. From the previous votes, I'm a little bit stricken up, but I do want to speak on this. I have a concern, and I realize that this is a last-minute plea, and that really the school board has sent you an assessment and what they're asking for. But I think there's a problem. This budget is a 6% reduction from the current year's budget, and it calls. It also states in the AM attached that it was expected to be a $25 million reduction over each year for the next 6 years, which could cost 250 employees out of our school district every year for 6 years. That's a substantial amount of employees in a 6-year period. On the state level, there is a bill I know before it for, again, this year, it's been up for other years, and to inflation-proof the state funding to our schools. And I hope they support that. But I would encourage you guys to do your part and do a similar thing. You guys should not be doing a 6% reduction to the amount of funding that our school districts are getting. At a minimum, you should be in keeping up with the inflation and contributing from the city coffers the same amount of money plus inflation to sustain our schools at the current level. We have a 2020 plan that includes having a 90% graduation rate. It includes having 90% popularity with our schools. It includes being rated top 25% in every single category. I do not understand how the city believes they're going to be able to meet such goals while decreasing the funding to our school systems and cutting 250 employees a year. I cannot stress that enough. In the AM from the school board, that just seems like an incredible amount. For 6 years, 250 employees. I am not a budget analyst, and I appreciate having Ms. Frasker in the room who is, but it seems like that if we are running a $30 million or so surplus in the city, the minimum we could do is continue funding our schools with our contribution, acknowledging that we expect the same contributions from the state and acknowledging that federal funding sources might be waning so that naturally might be plateauing our funding. But I do not think having the contribution from the city of the municipality also shortchanging their funding is the solution. And in fact, just is exacerbating the problem. And really, education is what builds a strong society. It is what allows for our city our municipality to continue to function. The fact that I know that the people who are doing the jobs around me have the education to do so. That I am not worried about the person who's driving the snowplow. I know that they know what they're doing. I'm not worried about the cashier. They know math. This is a basic fundamental of our society. It does not get any more basic. And I would urge you to send this back to the school board with the understanding that you guys are intending to continue the same level of contribution that you did last year. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Mr. Trombley.
I appreciate you coming down. I just kind of wanted to, not necessarily a question, but just kind of help you understand the way the process works. The state changed their education funding formula, and what they said is that they were going to carry a majority burden cost, and I don't use burden in the negative sense. But what they also did was that they placed a limit on what the local contribution can be. And so if we went above what we have here, you would only see a reduction in state funding coming from that. So if we gave $1 million more, it would be a wash because the state would just give $1 million less. And that's because of the state funding formula changed in last year's session. So that's one of the reasons why you're seeing a reduction in the local contribution. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, I am well aware of that. I would also remind you, however, that there is a bill currently being heard in Juneau for inflation proofing and raising the base student allocation. So I would urge that if you guys stated that you were willing to continue your contribution, that could actually be putting effort on our state officials to be pursuing the same measures and to also be increasing the base student allocation and your contribution. If the city was willing to continue that, I imagine our state elected officials would see that as a sign and consider the legislations before them and act accordingly.
Okay. Thank you. There are no other questions. Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Phyllis Spencer-Bells, and I am a product of the Anchorage School District. I did not pass half of 9th grade because I was kicked out for being a kid and running with the wrong crowd. But when I went to the paralegal school admittance exam, I passed with flying colors, when Bush students who graduated with full honors did not. This is a new Fiat oil you're playing with here. And when you're talking about state resources that are apparently dwindling at the Parnell's lack of a tax break, I don't get what you're trying to push through here. What I'm trying to say here is I can read and write English pretty good as long as I have spell check, but no comprende new Fiat, meaning it's a new Fiat oil, and you people in this city have done nothing but demean, harass, and pretty much throw genocide issues off on my culture and the other cultures of the Alaska Native tribes in this region. I think that the Anchorage School District would be better served if they had language lessons for the very people who pay the bills, instead of German, whatever else, and whoever else happened to pop along and figure out how to steal more money from my tribe. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Richard Brown. This probably will pass, and it's been worked on pretty well. I've tried to track it as it was developed. This is a budget that starts to show a little reality, just like the gentleman two before me. We have flat funding. We may have flat funding for a while. We may even have decrease in funding. And I think we need to get used to it. We need to plan for it. And the cuts that we see this time, I think, are just a canary in the coal mine, that we're going to have to do a lot of better thinking, economizing, and a few more cuts probably, because I think we've overbuilt the system we've got. And now that flat funding is occurring, we're seeing the results of it. Our results aren't very good, and we put an awful lot of money into it. So I think the cuts aren't going to be that painful in terms of outcome. We need better outcomes. I look forward to seeing the next couple of years and see how the school district innovates and maybe comes up with new ideas and different ways to save a little money, to better utilize the money they've got. So this is a good budget, but it's going to be better in the future, because I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got good start on reprioritizing our school, and I hope that we get to continue that and keep the ball going. I'd also like to put in a pitch for, let's try a little school choice. I think we have quotas for the charter schools and ABC schools that we've got now. People can't get into them. We need more of that, and maybe we'll get better outcomes for less money, because I know they get less of the student funding formula, and they seem to do a better job. So I'm for a little bit more of that, maybe even school choice. And let's see if we can do better, cheaper. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Hall. I'd like to thank everybody. I know it's been a crucial, really trying time. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciate your courage. This is about money and budgets and schools, correct? I spoke a little bit about education when I spoke in favor of Prop 37, so I'm pretty sure that's related. Is that correct, through the chair, Mr. Hall?
We'll need your name.
My name, I'm sorry, Mr. Starr. My name is Darrell Lanzon. I'd also like to say that I am the newly appointed chairman for the Republican Party, and I understand that you are not partisan, but three of you, Mr. Hall, Mr. Trainey, and Ms. Frasca, are in my district now as a Republican, and you're all registered Republicans, though you're not participating in the party at this point. So I'd just like to announce that to you, and now I'll speak about education. I spoke about it because I think there is, one of the things I mentioned before was that I believe education has become nothing more than indoctrination. I think the idea that that gentleman mentioned about some choice in schools, I think homeschooling is an idea. So I think that there's actually a place for a lot more money to be cut here. In fact, I think there's a lot of money that can be cut, and I can actually save you money in the same way as with an idea that I'm going to put forth here in a few seconds. Mr. Mayor actually had an education summit, and I spoke about the education summit, and I tied in a very important public health issue to that education summit. And it was the Harvard study that you have all received. Tonight, you will receive another email. It's from Dr. McCullough's website. It is a documentary that was released February 16, 2013 regarding water fluoridation and the lowering of IQ in children and education and its effects. You will receive it tonight. I know that when you end water fluoridation, you will have money to spend elsewhere.
I got to ask you, are you going to get specifics in regards to the school budget? That's the topic before us.
I understand that this is about cutting the school budget, correct? This is changes in the budget. I am encouraging you to cut more. And I'm telling you where you can save money and actually be able to keep it in the school budget and help children in two different ways. One, by potentially raising their IQs and reducing their cancer rates. And two, which is, again, a study that I have put to you that's on a government website. It is not something that came from any crackpot place. It is a .gov website. The National Institute of Health and a Harvard study. It is reputable science that was released last year. And it's regarding education, and that's why I decided to speak on this. Because, again, I care. Okay? I will end now, Mr. Hall, and I will say that last week, or 2 weeks ago, I spoke in favor of an ordinance that you're a co-sponsor of. And again, you treated me like a second-class citizen. You let plenty of people speaking against Ordinance 37 go over, and you didn't give me a minute. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Hall, members of the Assembly, Mr. Mayor. I always like to go back to the documents as to why we're...
Could you give us your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Tom McGrath. And go back to the charter, and I think Don Smith was on the Charter Commission. He probably remembers that he made a mistake, though, in the Charter Commission. He says, in the Charter Commission, a candidate for the school board should be a qualified municipal voter. And it says the school board shall have 7 persons elected at large from seats A through G. The problem is the language on, I believe, Chapter 17 doesn't specifically say how you cease being a qualified voter. It tells you how to become a voter, but not how you cease. So we have a school board member. We have 6 school board members, as far as I'm concerned, and then we have one that lives in the Marshall Islands. And if you go to the school board meetings, and I don't go anymore, but I watch them on TV, there's always 6 school board members up there. Everything it says here, the school board of 7 persons shall develop the budget. Well, you have a school board that of 6 members that has developed a budget, so it's flawed from the start. I think what you need to do is tell them to fix the school board and have 7 members before they present the budget to you. And then I think that the Assembly needs to come up with a language so that we know when somebody has left the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Tim Steele, former school board member and citizen of West Anchorage. Just a couple of comments. I understand the state funding changes that have taken place to the local limit, and that is an issue. But the cuts that are currently being made, having to be made because of flat funding, are causing serious damage. They're going to roll back the advances that our school system has made over the last number of years, and I think that's wrong. What the city can do, however, is roll back the charges, the additional charges that they are making to the school district, like transferring the resource officer, cost of the resource officers, which was originally a community policing activity, wholly to the school district. That would help. It would help if we weren't having to pay for the trail use that we as taxpayers pay for anyway. There are a number of other fees. ML&P and AWW have increased their fees to the extent that they're contributing more to the city coffers. The school district doesn't benefit because of that. They're a consumer of those products, and therefore they pay higher rates. There are things creatively that the assembly and the city could do to help the school district, and I hope they would. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Chairman Hall.
Good evening.
My name is Jeffrey Humphreys. I had actually not planned on speaking on this topic tonight, but something that has bothered me for a while is the fact that setting budget levels for the school district is a blunt instrument. It is not a good way to improve education, and the Assembly needs to look at other ways of affecting the way our educators are motivated. That's all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Hall. I'm Ed Graff, Anchorage School District Superintendent. I just wanted to briefly state the importance of what we're doing here tonight in presenting a balanced budget to the Assembly. I also want to thank the Assembly for the opportunity to have great conversation at our last joint Assembly School District meeting, and look forward to continuing our discussions around supporting our students and making sure that we do what's right for the students of Anchorage.
Thank you. Mr. Horniman?
Mr. Graff, thank you, Superintendent. Sir, in reference to what Mr. Steele, one of the speakers, has spoken to, could we get a copy or a detailed costing of what the municipalities charge in the school district? Because as I understand it, yes, I think that is, he's got a good point. And we're going to be dealing with first quarter budget revisions coming up. So I know the school resource officers, I kind of ballpark it, but there's a lot of other little charges in there that I'd like to. So if you could get that to us, that's fine. I just, because what perhaps could happen is if we were to absorb those costs back into the general government side, perhaps instead of 25 million less, it might be 20 million less or 23 million or whatever. So.
Absolutely. We'll get that and pass it through to the clerk.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Just as chair of the Assembly, I would really appreciate it if you relate to the school board and yourself as well. I really appreciated the presentation that was given to us in the work session last Friday. I think what happened there, and it's a shame Mr. Starr was stuck trying to get back from Lake Louise and didn't get out of there quite early enough to make it, but I honestly believe that the product that you delivered to us during that meeting is what Mr. Starr has really been working and trying to see achieved, and it was not only a great presentation, I love the fact that the entire board participated in doing it. So, and I see Mr. Starr is in the queue.
I didn't know we were going to debate it. I was going to put some comments on the record after we closed public hearing, but I did read everything, and I am duly impressed. I won't tip my hand as to which way I want to vote on the budget, but the 6-year forecasting now with real numbers in there is a candid example, as well as the realities of some of the points of contention, the flat funding issues, and how we jointly work together on that. So, because I wasn't there doesn't mean I wasn't listening, and I read everything, and I'm duly impressed so far. And I'd love to continue to consult on it, and we'll work through the challenges. Trust us, whether it's a suggestion of Mr. Honeman's that he's leading towards some of that other stuff. But, the way it was packaged, 6 school board members or not, it is very, very well done. And I think it's open and transparent to those that read it, and I read it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other questions, Mr. Graff. Oh, Ms. Johnston?
I just want to echo everybody's opinion. I, too, have been very impressed this year, and I want to say congratulations to our new superintendent. And thank you very much. It was a great package, and we greatly appreciated it.
Okay. Ms. Frasca?
To participate in the piling on. I, too, thank you for the information on Friday. And I'm sure all my colleagues on the the Assembly have checked the SBA scores and taken note that 12 is edging up, which is a great trend to see. So thank you. Good work to you and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone at all?
Good evening. Cheryl, it's good to see you here. First time I got to mention that. Billy Ray Powers. If the schools were getting a better job done, I'd be okay with this. But folks don't have a choice here. Parents don't have a choice. You send your kid to the neighborhood school that performs in the 33 percentile, your chances aren't too good. I like what's going on in the state level right now, the idea of vouchers, choice. Give parents a choice. For the amount of money we put into this, I could easily have my child with a master's degree for the amount of money spent getting them to 12th grade. I'm not happy with it. I've drove my kids all over town trying to get them a way to go, because 30% of our kids don't graduate, and they can't, because they can't pass an 8th grade test, 8th grade level test. Now, how many more of them are graduating at the 8th grade level? I'm not happy with it. My neighborhood school, 33 percentile nationwide. Half or 2/3 of my property taxes go to that school. I'm not happy with it. So I do like to see a little cut in this budget, but I'm not even happy with that. I want either some production, I want something for the money. What other kind of organization can sit and have their school buildings vacant, sit and have their properties vacant for 1/3 of the time? That's all summer. We close the doors. That's because we're so affluent. We close the doors to our schools for 1/3 of the year. Can't we use these buildings? Can't we get a better return for the buck? Anyway, I urge you to say no to this. We got to make some changes, and the only way we're going to do it is to not accept the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Mr. Flynn.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I was going to actually respond to Jeff when he came up. For your information, Jeff, I asked that same question of Mr. Frank Reed about school funding. And Frank Reed, as you may know, has recently passed, I guess about a year ago now, year and a half ago, and he was the chair of our charter commission when this municipality and borough unified back in the 70s. And he was very clear when I asked him a little bit about the Assembly's role in setting school district budgets, and he said, you get to tell them how much they get to spend, nothing else. If they want to spend it on gold-plated toilet seats, fine. You just have to tell them how much. And so I understand it is a pretty blunt instrument, and that's why we have seen an increasing degree of collegiality between the school board and the Assembly, so we have a clear understanding of one another's processes and finances. And as you heard here tonight, that process is much improved over the past few years, and I think we're reaching a level of fiscal synergy that's positive for all taxpayers. But we, the Assembly, get one vote, and that's how much. as we're doing here tonight. So, and you can catch me offline later if you have more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, I'd urge support on this, the budget. I'm concerned about the state's level of investment as well. At the same time, we're, as a state, saying that we've got to cut $1 billion. We're giving $1 billion up in potential revenue. Not that we should concern ourselves. There's billions sitting in the bank that's unreserved and can be used if we needed it to, and if they chose to. But notwithstanding that, I am concerned about the loss of, for the fact that we may be, and I guess that's the question perhaps to Ms. Mahoney, and I'm not sure if the school superintendent, if there's are we collecting into this budget the maximum amount that we can that bumps up against the state's formula under this proposed budget? Do you know, either one of you?
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Honeman, I didn't hear your question.
I think the chairman may be answering, but are we collecting the maximum amount we can for city revenue for the school district's purposes that would abut us up at the ceiling level, or where the state's formula is, the replacement for the local contribution? If that's the correct question.
Yes.
Okay. So then Mr. Steele's right. Then it comes back to the local area of what are we charging? Are we charging the school district for stamps because, we're sending out the tax bill that collects for both? Seems a bit goofy. They don't have maybe we send it to them one year and they mail it out, and the next year we mail it out. We could do something a little differently. I don't know. But bottom line is there's a lot of things that I think we could do locally that might ease the concern, particularly when it pertains to non-education, items. The police officers in the schools are not there as teachers, instructors. They're there to help make our community safer, and I think that's a couple $1 million hit that we need to take that back from the burden of the school and let them put that into education in the classroom. I think that's where you're headed, and I laud that effort. So coming up first quarter budget revision, that's where my intent is. Thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
This is just a question that anybody might be able to answer it. In regards to what Mr. Honeman said, if we do change, let's say we take the SROs and the municipality takes that cost, because we can't give any more money to the school district without a corresponding state reduction, would it just be a wash, or am I looking at that wrong? Debbie?
Ms. Osiander.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to.
No, basically it would be a cost avoidance. So they wouldn't have to pay something, and so they'd potentially have some money available to spend on something else. What we're just saying right now is we're going to approve this amount of taxes. The other could be done at first quarter budget if we wanted to.
So there will be no impact of state funding by doing that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14B, AR number 35, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, approving water improvements to be constructed in conjunction with the McRae Road upgrade and providing for assessment of benefited properties at the time of service connection. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14C, AR number 56, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly authorizing the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility to contribute funds in the amount of $204,295 to QM Development, LLC, for the construction of sanitary sewer infrastructure within Independence Drive.
Move to approve.
Second.
We need
sorry.
it for some...
I was just getting excited.
I apologize. I withdraw my...
Anyone for public testimony? Anyone at all?
the Eklutna elders don't recall signing away the water rights for Eklutna Lake. And I'm completely flustered here because that seems like a lot of money for one little tiny neighborhood that isn't nearly as big as some of the Jugiak lots I came from, and they didn't sign away their water rights either. So, yeah, this is confusing for me to watch. I don't understand it. I just know that I don't know why the pipe comes from Eklutna instead of some of the lakes around town that just keep giving on an hourly basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley and Mr. Flynn? That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14D, AO number 44, an ordinance authorizing disposal by direct negotiated sale of Heritage Land Bank parcels number 5-035 and 5-036 and 5-037, legally described as lots 1, 2, and 3, Block 2, Northern Estates Subdivision. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none.
Move to approve. Oh.
I don't understand what the Heritage Land Bank is, and if that's parklands or something that was hidden from municipality of Anchorage till this mayor, it causes controversy throughout the whole world, basically, at this point. Parcels legally described as blah, 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 Morton, wherever that is. Sale of. Does that mean you're making money on it, or does that mean you're buying it yourself and then getting some contractor that doesn't know what Davis Bacon is to sit and plop up a house that doesn't qualify for code in the first place? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item number 14F, AO number 45, an ordinance authorizing a land lease located on a portion of Tract J, Port of Anchorage, Edition number 2, according to plat number 2012-19, between the Port of Anchorage and the Alascom Inc., doing business as AT&T Alaska. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
AT&T Alaska and Port of Anchorage. Where's the railroad part in there? Okay, ordinance authorizing a land lease located at a portion of tract Port of Anchorage, addition to Alascom and AT&T. What is that for? Telephone, cable, satellite? Because we got that too, and this doesn't make sense to me. What about the ACS thing with the ATU? When they're buy off with the union.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14G, AO number 55, a resolution approving the letter of agreement between the municipality of Anchorage and the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Local 367 regarding implementation of the Kronos SAP operating systems. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body for action.
Second.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14H, AO number 57, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $177,800 as a contribution from the area-wide General Fund 101 Real Estate Services 2013 operating budget to the area-wide Capital Fund 401 Real Estate Department Estate Services for City Hall capital maintenance and improvements in the amount of $102,800 and tenant improvements of $75,000. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
I guess what I want to say is the general public doesn't understand what the general fund is for the municipality of Anchorage, because that's where the traffic tickets go, the DOT corruption, and the Performing Arts Center that got bought off with street maintenance monies and that kind of thing. That all came from the general fund. And you people are sitting here saying you don't have any money when there's so much in the general fund, and the general fund has so much interest that they could actually build a homeless shelter on their own. And it just seems so mean. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say there's no clarification on the general fund for the general public. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
No one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14I, AO number 59, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $26,080 as a contribution from the 2013 operating budget area-wide General Fund 101 Public Transportation Department to the Public Transportation Capital Improvement Program Fund 485 Public Transportation Department and Federal Transit Administration, FTA, State of Good Repair, Section 5039 grant, were tendered on $1,304,000 to the Public Transportation Capital Improvement Program Fund 485, Public Transportation Department for capital assistance. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify?
Again, that didn't fly through me or the Alaskan Native Claims Settlement Act very well. I just wanted to clarify that with you people.
Anyone else? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14J, AO number 60, AR number 60, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $9,000 as a contribution from the area-wide General Fund 101 to the Public Transportation Capital Improvement Program 485 and a grant when tendered of $450,000 through the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the Public Transportation Capital Improvement Program Fund 485, all within the Public Transportation Department, providing a portion of the required local match for the purchase of 3 40-foot buses and the remainder for 2013 transit projects as needed. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify?
Hi, me again. Yeah. When I was 18, I went to the Winey School of Real Estate, and we learned that commingling is completely corrupted and illegal. And what the general fund looks like to me is called commingling of accounts. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Mr. Starr.
None of these buses help Eagle River or Chugiak. Just wanted to let you know that. You're not going to vote, period? Well, I'm going to continue to support the votes, but one of these days we'll have to deal with the transit question as our population grows. So, we don't mind. $450,000 of area-wide and $9,000. It's area-wide money includes Chugiak, Eagle River.
We appreciate that,
We'll get
Mr. Starr. Ms. Osiander, are you going to reinforce that?
I just really like sitting by Mr. Starr.
No kibitzing.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll reinforce it because I'm a big transit advocate for the entire community, and I would really like to see service provided for Eagle River like it is for the rest of our community. Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14K, AO number 47, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title VI, Finance, to provide for departmental information or identification of performance measure data and quarterly reporting to assist the Assembly in evaluating the annual operating budget. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Honeman.
My only concern on the performance measures, which of course I absolutely think is a wonderful idea, my concern being that there are some things that are really difficult to measure. Have we taken into account things like crime rate? If it's down, if it's up, sometimes when we look at it from the data, it's difficult to say. If we had more enforcement on traffic citations or traffic enforcement, perhaps that would stop fatality car crashes and things of that nature. No one can say that definitively. It's more of an anecdotal comment and perhaps an observation. So I guess I'm just really concerned about how objective these performance measures are going to be. Is there some calculations with that? Is there some formula or a process?
Well, you want to address it? Go ahead. As you know, we are doing performance measures now, and Ms. Frasca was very much involved in helping us through that process getting started. And, something like performance measures is always a continued improvement as you go through and find better ways to evaluate or find other issues that are more important sometimes and a higher priority for the community as well as the Assembly to basically evaluate it based on a performance measure. The performance measures, it's whenever there's a human element in it, sometimes one could say that maybe they're not objective as possible, but we are trying to make them as objective as possible.
Okay.
Ms. Frasca.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Honeman, the departments developed performance measures within strategic frameworks about 3 years ago. And this codifies a process that has been underway for 3 years. There are quarterly reports that are posted on OMB's website, and it facilitates discussions just like you were describing in terms of what's the effectiveness of programs, and you can see over time how if, say, staffing went down in traffic and you see a corresponding increase of incidents, it facilitates and informs that discussion. And so they can be a really informative tool by which to discuss allocation of dollars. And so this really is putting into place what has been a practice for the last 3 years, and the measures all were developed by the departments.
I appreciate that. Thank you, because, again, and I'm just looking at item B, of course, which has been in there, but it's as the mayor sees fit, they may share the information with the Assembly, and I see fit. I think that we need to be more attuned to performance measures if we're going to be, particularly in the area when we're trying to cut things, we need to make sure we're doing it in the right areas. Just as easily as if the other end, if we're adding something.
Mr. Starr?
Ms. Frasca, I only worked with it for 1 year under the Begich administration, but wasn't there a matrix tied to the budgeting program and the budget building program? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where we had this sort of below the line and above the line concept of what would happen to services if we cut down below the line. You remember that concept?
Yes, Mr. Starr, but I don't remember it from Mr. Begich's term, but certainly under Mr. Wirch's term, they were service levels. And they did rank in priority the various components of spending, and they were prioritized. And Ms. Elfie Gray Jackson certainly remembers that as well. And then they went to a new budget system under Mr. Begich, and that system was no longer functioning. And so as a result, the budget is presented completely different now.
I see. So there is no quantifiable function that we would measure dollars. It's sort of not automatic, of course, but that's my question for you.
Well, my hope had been with the new SAP system that there would be a way to have cost centers, because in theory, depth IDs, the units in which the budget's presented, are supposed to be cost centers. And in a perfect world, you then have performance measures associated with that depth ID or cost center. So you can see at that level of performance, that level of effectiveness, these are the dollars required. So in theory, if the dollars go down, you can see what happens to the effectiveness. Now, I don't know the status of what the new SAP system is going to be able to do that, but that would be a goal.
Sure. Well, thank you for the effort to bring this to our attention. I think it's a useful program and put it in code. We'll keep it there. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
I think it's certainly a useful tool. I don't think it's really necessary to put it in code, but I don't really care one way or the other. So it's one of those things where we just keep putting stuff in code to make ourselves feel good, I think, but that's all right.
Ms. Frasca?
I just wanted to point out to Mr. Honeman his concern about, on page 2, line 21, the subsection B, that's existing code.
Right, I understand.
Okay.
We haven't, I guess the mayor hasn't seen fit to get it to us. I just haven't seen, if I've been on the body almost 3 years, I haven't really seen much in the way of performance measurings in. That's why perhaps putting it in code would require them to do it. But it actually looks on section B, still has the option. I get it. For instance, on the depth IDs and the cost centers, you can't predict year to year whether you're going to have 1 homicide or 20 homicides. I'm going to police. Or fire, one huge 4-alarm fire, or 15. And each one of those has a cost unit, So if you could pinpoint a homicide and say, how much money was spent on one homicide, it's pretty subjective, because if the homicide was one bad guy, one victim, bad guy standing there with a smoking gun, you get there, you can track down how many officers responded, how many detectives worked it, how much forensics cost. But if you get somebody where the unknown suspect, 3 victims, 3 different scenes, costs could grow. It's just difficult. I say it's very subjective. A homicide is not just a homicide, and that's my point. Is I'd really like to see some of these performance measures to be able to base some of our decisions that we are making on some of these, particularly in the area of cuts. So, thank you,
Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Starr, I remember that system we had under Wirtz. It was a good system for us as we were looking at the budget, because you could tell how much each increment added. The service level we'd be adding into it. I miss that system, sir. Wish we had it back again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Starr.
Well, I kind of bristled at Mr. Flynn's statement about codifying, and I've worked hard, as most of you know, to make sure we get regular and routine reports delivered from the administration to us, and I bet you that when we see these attached to perhaps even that monthly report, as we get later in the year, we see budget to actual expenses, we see other questions that will facilitate. And I guess I were to use proud, but I'm proud of this body that they've embraced those discussions. We've had them at higher levels than I've ever had in terms of the reactions from this body going, hey, wait a minute, your budget to actual is exceeding, your overtime level is exceeding. And I think this now will start to bring the full circle to that is, hey, we are working harder because we had a major case or we had something, and I bet you that there's going to be a link there. And I'm looking forward to seeing it, and if it's demanding of the administration to do it and burdensome and costing, wonderful, but I think it also has the departments justify us to great and good performance will also be reliant on that information. So, Mr. Flynn, I'm happy to modify code if it continues to put reliable and productive products in front of us and future assembly members. So, again, we'll reinstate that. I'm pleased that you've done this, Cheryl, and hopefully we can continue to enhance it. Thank you.
Ms. Frasca.
And just finally, the performance measures have been included in the budget books that you have received for the last 2 years. So it is that, and then the updates are on the website.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one really quick comment. I'm sure Ms. Frasca remembers when this whole transparency issue began and Mr. Traney and Mr. Teshi brought forward all these changes when you were the OMB director, and they were really good changes, and I was happy to be staffed and see it happen, and I'm pleased to see the performance measures included in this transparency, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Actually, seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Ms. Johnston?
Yep.
That motion carries unanimously. We have before us item 14L, AO number 41, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Section 9.36.045 and 9.4.303 to allow vehicle window tinting as prescribed for medical conditions and to provide for correction of the offense by proof of a valid medical prescription or notarized certification. This item is
Chairman?
before the body for testimony.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Chief
Mr.
of Police
Trainee.
would like us to delay action on this till the 9th of April so they can give it to the department to look at it and bring us back an evaluation. They hadn't been able to look at it yet.
Okay. Well, we'll take testimony if there is any. And
Yeah, if they did actually write tickets for that, there would be less people with their windshield tinted in this town. You could make money there, Mark. Yeah. Thank you.
anyone else? Anyone at all? Mr. Trainee?
Move to postpone action on this item till our meeting of the 9th of April, sir.
Second.
Mr. Trini, do you want to continue the public hearing?
Yes, might as well. Thank you, Ms. Osiander.
Second.
Thank you. This concludes our agenda for this evening. Anyone, no special orders, no unfinished agenda, audience participation.
My name is Daryl Lanzon still. I have a little bit of time now. It's kind of funny how all those shills all ran off right after that vote, and I'm left alone, and I got 3 minutes, and I'm going to speak on that, and I'm going to probably be able to cover the things that you stopped me from last time with that whole little few seconds that I took over. And again, I want to point out, so the public hears this one more time, that 2 weeks before that, I sat in this very room with a person who was in her probably 50s or 60s, who was her very first time here, and felt that she was entitled to 7 extra minutes, and you gave that to her. Now, I am a regular fixture, I'd like to think, here. I am an intelligent person. It's pretty obvious. If you don't think so, bring it. And I have a drive. I don't just come here for my kicks. I'm not here to make friends with any of you either, for that matter. I am here because I am a concerned citizen. I am an American citizen. I'm a sovereign citizen, and I value those rights. I've learned a lot about those rights, and a couple people mentioned the Constitution or excuse me, not the Constitution in somewhat, but it was actually the Supreme Court, and I kind of laughed at that. Because I have done my share of studying of law, and I have a firm grasp on it, and I am here to hold your people's feet to the fire. Like I said, I became a chairman. I expect the people to hold my feet to the fire. I am doing my duties as that chairman by actively campaigning in assembly races as according to how the party that I represent sees fit. Now, I'm here as a private citizen. I am not speaking on behalf of the party. I just simply stated that, and I want to make that very clear, that I am Daryl Lanzon, a private citizen. There are some of your races that do cover my district, so I am concerned about that. You are registered in the party that I represent, so I am concerned about that. Okay? And that's the end of that. Now I'm going to go back to fluoridation because I told you last time I spoke that you're going to make a decision on it. I spoke about due process, and I am right. You can check that. It was not notified to the public for a hearing. It was notified to people from the ADA and the CDC and select emails. I did not even get one of those emails because I was not on that email list at the time. We are due a public hearing that is announced on the Muni website regarding water fluoridation. It was not happened. You announced all these other ones. They're on the website. Everything from Prop 37 has been on the website. You just happened to miss that one. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying it needs to be corrected. Due process was not followed. I would like that. I'm also going to plan, I don't know exactly how I need to do that, but I've noticed that there is the public appearance, the thing that you do at the beginning. Well, I want you to know to plan on hearing me speak about the Harvard study and Fluoride Gate. I said you guys are going to get an email tonight. I said it was released February 16th. It's on the Mercola website. Mercola's reputable. Harvard is reputable. It's coming. I'm just telling you, you have time to act. It's not going to wait till after summer. Thank you very much.
Mr. Starr?
I'm happy you address us, and I think there's 2 points that I would observe. One of them is it tends to be problematic when you're critical of individual members, and I'm not saying that you are or were, but we're here to do that. And personally, and it's not to lecture or anything, I kind of stop listening when there's degradations off topic.
Okay.
And that would only be a guidance to you on how you deliver your message. The other guidance I would say to you is that typically we debate and bring forth items that are written, drafted, legally produced, and sponsored by elected officials. And
Okay.
so far, the topic that you're most interested in hasn't been sponsored or brought forth, so it's very challenging to have a public safety discussion around, sort of a non-topic. So you're going to need to get somebody at the elected official level to sponsor some sort of legislation that you're seeing fit as action.
Okay. May I?
I'm not speaking for myself
I
or otherwise,
understand.
but when we don't respond, it's because we have nothing to respond to other than your public testimony. I've not been moved yet to write anything.
Okay.
And partly my constituent body is a lot of well and septic type of people. We have different watershed issues.
Well, that's apathy.
And that's not to say I'm disinterested for the entire community, but less moved to take on the topic. So I want
I
a clear
really
answer
appreciate
from
you.
me
Oh, sorry.
to you. You've testified, so thank you for that.
I appreciate you actually, because most of the time people don't have anything to say to me, and in my response to that, if I can take 30 seconds or something, I don't want to be ran off or chased out by security or surrounded by police again. But what you addressed is I've actually offered a resolution that is already written. I have a PDF that I can send, and all you have to do is dot the I's and cross the T's. Okay, I'm not saying, and I have provided evidence, and I am actually, what I would like, if you would like to see me be less hostile, if you will, or aggressive, is to see some courage, because the evidence is there. I have sent you many, many links. In fact, for that presentation that I plan to do, I am going to bring a very large graph here, and I am actually going to have cancer statistics from this state for 5 years, since Juneau ended water fluoridation, and it's going to be a comparison, and I'm going to source it from the National Cancer Institute, and we're going to look at that. And then you people are going to have that on your conscience. I'm not trying to be mean to people. I would like this to be done with. I would like the right thing to happen.
Excuse me, I'm not going to be mean either, but you'll have to do that in 3 minutes.
Well, I thought it's 5 minutes when you come at the beginning.
Sorry.
No. Okay, well, that's all right. I have, pictures say a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm not here to challenge you. The other protocol is typically we don't sort of what we call badger the witness. We don't have a program for that. If I need more information from you, I can reach you offline, or I do ask a podium question. So,
well, I appreciate you asking the question and in a sense giving me a few more minutes or whatever to speak on it. So I appreciate that.
That's all. Thank you for
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone at all?
I'm one of the people that did not get to speak in reference to the ordinance that passed earlier tonight. So since this is audience participation, I would like to speak on that topic, even though it's already passed. What I wanted to say about it, which is not the same as everybody else said, so my speech was not made by somebody else, is that in the state, we're talking about education vouchers. In the state, we're talking about methods of decreasing the ability for people to have collective bargaining. And if you look at the whole picture of what's going on in Alaska, it's the same as what's going on in the lower 48, which is you're knocking the props out of the ladder of success. I teach at a Title I school. If those kids don't get a good education, they can't go on to do anything else. If they do get good training, they can't be part of a profession where their rights are protected. It's all part of one big story. If you can't see that you contributed to that, if you voted for this, I feel desperately sorry for you. I am very sad that I saw people come here and have to demean themselves to explain to their bosses what they do and how well they do it. I'm very disappointed. Very disappointed. You have no idea what you've done if you voted for this. No idea. You really don't. You're eliminating the possibility for people to earn their way out of poverty and to know that a skilled job is going to guarantee them an opportunity to move up in life, because there's not going to be anybody looking out for their rights if there's not a strong union. That's part of what makes the middle class work. And if that isn't there, You might as well just say, you're poor, you're going to stay dirt poor, and those of us that have the ways and means to get an education and to get a decent job, we're going to go there, and to heck with you guys. We don't care about you. Because that's pretty much what you just did. Thank you for this time to talk. I'm really glad I got to say it, because I didn't have to say what everybody else had to say. And I'll tell you what, if we have people in government that think it's okay that people don't get to speak because maybe somebody else said the same thing, then why not just eliminate half the voters? Because, you know, they might just vote the way everybody else voted. That was what we heard when we had trouble with voting. I'm desperately concerned that any of you would have ever had that attitude. I feel sorry for you, and I feel sorry for the kids I teach, because you don't care. You're not thinking about the consequences of your actions. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman?
Thank you for coming down. I know it's the last of the hour here, and
I would have been here earlier, but I had choir practice. So
I appreciate you taking your time to come down here, even though, again, the vote has been taken and such. But thank you for sharing comments. And I'm just as concerned as you are what our future looks like for a lot of reasons. And it's not because I don't think that labor doesn't make a decent living. I think they do. But the way we went around this whole process is very concerning to me. And I am concerned how the next decade or two is going to look like here in our community. And I want to thank you for taking the time to help educate our young children.
Because I think it's a big picture, and I think that when we look at one thing, each thing separately, people don't look at the whole thing and say how it's going to impact on us 5, 10, and 15, and 20 years from now. So I'm very concerned about that. So thank you.
Thank you. May we get your name, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Neva Reese. I'm a librarian for the Anchorage School District. I work at North Star Elementary.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing, hearing none, the motion to adjourn, second. We stand adjourned.